Good morning.
Did you change your audio from your?
Yeah.
Probably not.
Go to setup, and is that called setup?
It's on Zoom?
Your
Yeah.
preferences, go to, it's in
Edit.
it's in the menu.
How big you
Preferences. There you go.
I don't think I've ever had this
And then go to
issue.
Audio. And then you want
MacBook.
your speakers.
Main office.
Yep.
There it goes.
So you've done this a couple of times.
Doesn't seem.
Well, probably nobody's talking. It's gonna be really loud.
Are you muted?
Hey, my
Yeah.
friends, just a reminder to mute your sound if possible, so that we are ready to roll. Thank you.
How you guys name is. Is that the only part?
Juniper Jesse.
If you want to make me a co-host.
Sure.
Thanks, Derek. Yes, that would be great. I will, Katie.
Yeah.
Rachel, you are also a co-host. Okay, my friends, it is 9 a.m. and we have great things to do today. I'm so excited that you're here. Thank you for being here. We are going to get rolling so that we can get to all of our cool stuff. We have a fabulous national presenter coming today, and we want to make sure that we can give him all the time that we can. So welcome to the STEM Institute. Katie is going to lead us through the first part of our day.
Hi, it's good to see everybody. And I know that like we're in that March period where we're like, I don't know if we're gonna get through this year. If it's, but we always do, right? May, June, they always come every time. But I feel like this is the point of the year where we're like, I'm not sure if it's gonna happen this year, and it definitely will. But wanted to first just say hello and thank you for being here, and appreciate the time you've taken to really suss out your vision and your goals and all those things that are happening. And this is kind of an overview of our morning here, and we're going to just move forward with who's here, what we're going to be discussing in terms of our learning intentions today, some of the norms that you can expect, just to kind of help us be able to do the business we came here to do today, and then an overview of the things that we're going to talk about, all of the things. So we're going to start off, we have a sign-in form that we need everybody to fill out. This is to help justify the subs and everything that we need to have, I believe. So make sure everybody in here fills in this form. Melissa has put in the chat. That's a fun sound. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but that's but as we're going forward, and Melissa, I just want to kind of just show a little bit with the Canvas course, because we're going to be showing you a lot of links, and so I want you to know how to access those, because some of you are, I'm looking at my friends in Lakeview, who I'm going to be your consulting coach working with you more closely. So, but I'm seeing you're all in the same room and you might not all be in the Zoom meeting individually. So if you want to find the access to all of the links, you can all go to our Canvas course. And if you click modules there on the left sidebar, then what you can do with that is scroll down to module 3, because this is where we are. This is meeting 3 here. And you're going to click session 3 presentation. It's the first page on the module. And if you click that, that will take you to where the slideshow is that you're looking at here. So all of the links that you're seeing on the screen share are going to be located in the slideshow. So you can go right in there and find the links to follow. So we need everybody before the day is out to click that, that slide, okay. Click the attendance in the slide on the slideshow that we're going to go right back to here. So just make sure that you find that on slide 3, that everybody here clicks the forms to make sure and show you're here, so that we can have that record. And we have the instructions as well as to how to deal with the substitutes. So just by introduction, who's here. I know I'm the third bullet, but I'm going to just take a second and introduce myself. That I'm Katie Dewey Hill. I work with educator development and the quality instruction team, and my focus is on instructional coaching and professional learning standards. And I get to work with all these fine people at USBE and the consulting coaches. And I'm happy to be here and I'm excited. I'm sorry I missed you last time. I was really sad I didn't get to be there for that meeting, but I'm here now and for the rest of the show, I think, for the rest of the series. So Melissa, I'll kick it off to you to just remind us who you are.
Hello, everyone. So I'm Melissa Mendenhall, and I'm the elementary science and STEM specialist for the State Board of Education. I'm just so excited to be part of this. This is a big deal. We're doing great things. So I'm excited to be here. Nathan Ock will be here in a little bit. He's joining us from France. So a little bit different time schedule, but he assured us he'll be here. So we'll see Nate in a little bit, but he won't be here for introductions yet. So I'll turn it over to Rachel.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel College, Educational Leadership Specialist at Utah State Board of Education. It's been great to work with you, and I'm excited for today's session. It's really robust, and so I'm excited to start working on it.
Awesome, and we have our teams here. And Melissa, I don't know if you've done this, but have the teams all met each other? Do we need to what do you think?
So that's kind of why we do our networking part, is to let them meet each other. So they do, in a roundabout way, meet each other.
Awesome. And so like we've got teams from, and it might be good to just go through the list of who our teams are representing. So I'm just looking for my little email I had here of the, okay, so represented here, and I'd love for you guys, somebody from your team to just kind of, you can either unmute and do a little woot woot or wave and show who you are. So we've got Salt Lake City School District. Let's see, everybody from there, like you're waving, awesome. They're coming to us, which is awesome. We got Iron County in that, there we go. Iron County, keep waving. There we go. We got a bunch of them in a room there. Awesome. Hello, Iron County. And we've got Washington County Coral Cliffs.
So the two from, Shauna's representing the two from Washington County because they're on spring break, and she's giving on a separate day to repeat what we're doing here today.
All right, Shauna, lots of pressure. All right, you're gonna have to remember everything you hear or just play the recording. I don't know. Thank you, Shauna. You've got a big job today. And then we have Murray School District. Where's Murray? There they are. Okay, hi, Murray. And we have Canyon School District. Let's see, there we go. Awesome, good to see you all. Vanguard. Where are my Vanguard people?
Wave, keep waving.
Vanguard.
Hey, Joy. Awesome. And then we have Freedom Academy. I'm looking, seeing. Wait, they'll be here in a minute, or they'll. And then my Lakeview people. Where are my Lakeview folks? All right, thank you, April. Okay, Lakeview, and then they're all in the room. So April is in the room too. She's just on a camera as well. So thank you. April, we're gonna count on your visual cues for the group because I can see you the best. So all right. Well, those are our groups today, which is awesome. It's good to see everybody. And then we have our consulting coaches for each of those groups. So Nate's in France. He'll be here in a minute. We've got John Hughes. John Hughes, you want to wave? Say hello. There we go. There's John Hughes. And John Hughes is working with Iron County. Kelly Yates. Kelly Yates is here working with Shauna to remember everything that happens today. And they're working with Washington County. And then Jolie Honey, who's also going to be helping with the sunsets in Washington County. And then Tammy Bird. Where's my friend Tammy Bird? She's coming. She's here. She's on her way, I bet. Anyway, Tammy's going to be helping with Murray. Cami Dupre. Hello, Cami, working with Canyons District. my friend Melanie working with Vanguard. There she is. Okay. And then Jamie Christensen. Looking for Jamie. Yep, there she is. She's working with the Freedom folks. And I'm going to be working with the Lakeview people. So that's that was our quick and dirty introduction. If you wanted to say more, I'll pause. And good. Okay, so let's go on to our next slide. So today what we're going to be covering, and I am going to just wait just a second while we go to the slideshow here. Today what we're going to be working on, our intentions of coming together today, is you're going to have some professional learning to help kind of build the capacity to create those effective STEM ecosystems, which this is one of those things which I'm sure you're learning cannot happen without the collective efficacy of the group. You can't be a STEM school with one teacher. It's got to be everybody working together. And then just like, what does that look like for your context? So today we're going to work on refining that action plan for getting to the vision that you cited early on in the program, and including the systems of support, like what do you need to make that happen? And so that's what we're going to be working through on our teams and on for our intentions for today. So how we'll know if that happens is you will be engaging in that learning. You'll produce a refined vision of STEM for your context, and you'll produce a refined action plan. So you're going to keep going back to those documents, following up, shining it up as you have more discussions and figure out what logistically you need and what supports that overall philosophy that brought you here in the first place. And then who else needs to be involved? Like, how are we going to engage the community? Because again, the elements of collective efficacy that are the responsibility of the community are going to be pretty important. So while you're here, just make sure you're here, which is an increasing challenge, I know, as we move through the year and more complicating factors arise. Just be present, and then also just focus on the strengths. It's easy to get overwhelmed by all the things that make things harder, all the complicators, but just focus on some of those opportunities that that you can see to make this work and make this happen. Because I found too, and you've probably seen this, and I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but when leadership is overwhelmed, they pass that savings on to the educators, don't they? So we need to have that asset, it's all possible mindset. You know, I'm not asking you to lie to yourself, but like, as you're thinking through, having kind of that idea of how am I going to meet the challenges that are going to predictably arise, because they can all be met. So thank you for all right. Thank you, Melissa. And then here's what we wanted to just talk about, what's going to happen today. This is kind of what should be done before you're here today. And we want to make sure you have an allotment of time in our meetings to complete some of these pieces. So assignment number 1, you're going to work on with the team. The assignment number 2, it's everybody all together. Assignment number, vision from day 2. This is something you're going to be looking at with your team, developing, refining the action plan from day 2. You're going to look at that document, and you can go back to Canvas where you turned it in to be able to access that as well. Those links that you're seeing with the blue underlines are hyperlinked in the slideshow. So that page in the module, remember day 3, that first page in the module has all the links to how to get to these assignments. They're also in Canvas in the module. There's many roads to one place, we're saying here. And so these are the things you're going to be able to accomplish today while we're all together. Melissa.
Yeah, and it just seemed like people wanted to know what assignments, what templates should I have ready to go for today? They're all on one page, so you know where to access them all. You'll also see them throughout the course or in the modules. So like Katie said, many ways you can access.
Awesome. So before we go on, does anybody have any questions about what's expected today? And I'll look in the chat too and see. I don't see any hands raised. I don't see any panicked faces. So if you have any questions throughout the day, there's lots of us here working to lead this effort. So you can put them in the chat. So even if the person talking isn't paying attention to the chat, one of us is. So we'll make sure and try to address your needs as we go through. All right, so I'm going to shift to my friend Rachel, who's going to share kind of these pieces with the breakout rooms.
So I think that Katie, with this is just to let everyone know, if you're not in a room together, or even if you are in a room, when Rachel takes you to the different discussions, these are the rooms you will put yourself in. So I'll open up the breakout rooms. You'll move to this room. So you might want to know which one is for your team, so that the coach can meet with you, or if you're in separate Zoom locations, you can all meet in one breakout room. So this is a list. You should have it in case you forget. It's here in the slideshow.
Thank you. And then we had a question real quick about, like, do I need to turn, these are all group assignments. So it's really one person in your group needs to turn it in for the team. So just know that piece of it's stuff you're going to be doing together, all these components. All right. So let's go on back to where I was before I jumped here. All right. So so just take a little mental note of your number of what your breakout room is. And I want to just kind of go through really quickly a little review of the logistics of dealing with the Canvas course. So Melissa's going to share screen, I think, and I'm going to walk through how to access these assignments and just kind of show you what that means. Now, for the assignments, while we're getting there, like I said, they are group assignments. So they're not everybody needs to do it. We've created this in a mechanism of like a shared doc so that you as a team can come together to share the progress you're making over your vision and your action plan and those assignments. So if we go down to our module 3, where all of our assignments are, you'll see assignment number 1 there. And this is going to be, I believe, the first thing we're going to do, right, in a minute here. So if you click that assignment, you'll notice that, and Melissa's, yeah, so you've got your assignment here, and it will just be, it's a group assignment. So as a group, one of you will need to submit the words that respond to these questions. So this will be done in like uploading a document or sharing a Google Doc link as well. So the norms your team's going to focus on today, because we understand, like, month to month, there's different challenges. And so it's kind of like thinking through, what do we need to really focus on today that will help us be on it for this? And so again, you're agreeing on as a team what that is, and you just choose one person from your team to turn it in, and it will show up for all of you. So for our purposes. So are there any questions on accessing the Canvas assignments? This module 3 is where you're going to live today. This is the only module you need to worry about. You can even like collapse all of the other modules if it helps make your screen a little less busy. But any person from your team can submit those assignments specifically. So I'll just pause. Do we have any questions about Canvas logistics?
So Katie, they can access the assignments through the slides, through the Canvas course. So there are a number of options.
Yeah, so if you clicked assignment 1 here in the slideshow, it took you to the same page as you would have gone to if you were, so many roads to the same thing. So I hope, like, oh no, should I go through the slideshow? Should I go through the Canvas course? Choose your own adventure. All right, it's up to you. Whatever is the easiest way for you to access that. For me, I'm like, I would just go to the Canvas course and find the page, just, you know, to minimize the places I go. But I'm not everybody, so you can do that anyway. And so that's the assignment 1, that bullet there, and the assignment 1, upload it here. It's on the same page. So like, you just click submit assignment. Melissa's page that she was showing is a teacher view, but for you, you should see a submit assignment option there on your side of it. And then, yeah, so. And then Melissa, we have the third bullet of a little activity here that we're thinking about. Do we want to do that or?
So yeah, let's let them just go into Teams for like
Okay.
5 minutes, get kind of, select their norm and get up their assignment uploaded just to kind of get things moving so they remember how it all works. But we won't take very long, maybe like 5 minutes. Does that sound okay, Katie?
Yeah, so what we're gonna do is we're just gonna open up those breakout rooms and Melissa, if you could take us back to the slide that has the list of the breakout room numbers, just to show us that one more time. That what you're gonna do is I'm gonna open those up and you can either, if you're in the same room, you don't need to go to a breakout room if you don't want to, but if you are not in the same room, please just go to your corresponding room and just take about 5 minutes to think through. And you could even kill two birds with one stone here by doing the assignment in Canvas and having somebody record that as well. So it's about 5 minutes and we'll see you back here in just a second. And then Melissa, let's click the slide, which is the one that has the room numbers in case people are not remembering what their room number is. Yeah, this one here.
Yeah, I just grabbed it and put it in the chat too, so if they need to
Awesome.
reference to the room.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rach.
You're welcome.
And Lakeview people, just so you know, as we're going through when we start doing some more intensive teamwork, I know that you all are in the same room, but just because I'm not in the room with you, what we can do is just go to the breakout room together, and that way I can be with you and support you as a consulting coach. Does that help? We don't have to do that right now, but I just wanted you to say that in the future.
They gave you a thumbs up.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Katie, what time would you like me to call everyone back at?
So I've got a timer going about 3.5 minutes. So
Okay,
is that okay? All right.
fabulous. I also changed the networking time to 15 minutes. Are you okay with that?
Sure.
Okay, Katie, I think everyone is back now.
Okay, well, welcome back. I hope you had a good discussion. I had a thought too of what we're gonna do for like the foreseeable future when we go into breakout rooms. Even if you're all in the same room, go to the breakout room so that the coach, the consulting coach, can be with you. So just keep that. I didn't say that and I didn't think of that, but I think that's our best way forward. So I just decided I'm going to say, go to your breakout room, even if you're all together. So whoever's in charge of the Zoom, if you're in a conference room. Where are we at right now? We're accessing so we've gone forward, we've accessed the Canvas course, just to review the structure of the Institute, and then our overall agenda for today. We're going to do some networking together here in just a moment. We're going to talk about the STEM definition according to Principle 2. And then we're going to have an awesome presenter. Dr. Carrie Snyder is going to come and share with us some excellent professional learning on how STEM can be integrated into a school's culture. Then we're going to have a break for lunch. And when we come back, we're going to engage in some team time where we're going to just continue to refine our vision, which you'll have some more information after hearing our speaker this morning of how that might apply to your context. Then thinking through stakeholder feedback and how to gather that and how to use the meaningful feedback that they share so that you can also have increased support for what you're working toward with your school and with your students. And then we will conclude and wrap up. All right, so we're going to the networking portion of our day here. And what this means is we're going to go to our breakout rooms for about 15 minutes. This is with your group, your team.
Hey, Katie, this is actually diverse groups. So to hear from other people.
Okay. You know what? Love it.
Hold on.
Thanks, Melissa. I'm sorry. It's just my name was in the speaker notes, so I was doing my best.
Oh.
This is what happens when you miss the last one. Sorry, guys. So this is networking time for you to engage with other people from other LEAs to talk through how you're getting feedback from your people. What kind of feedback did you get? How did you plan to get the support from the different groups to authentically engage them? And then what information did you gather from that experience that helped you to revise or think through another component of your vision and action plan? So we're going to have networking time notes. It's in module 3. And I believe this assignment might be a little different than the rest of them, right? Because let me go down to networking time notes. Okay, so this is an assignment that is, let me make sure here, this is not a group assignment, this is an individual assignment. So these will be your ideas that you're gathering from that networking experience. So this will be an individual one, everybody can turn it in, and this template is in the assignment in Canvas. So you can find this and just put some, you're not writing a dissertation, so don't feel a lot of pressure. If it's making you cry, you're overthinking it, okay? I know that sounds really dismissive of your feelings, and it maybe is, but like I'm just telling you to make sure and just use this to benefit you and process your thinking. Candace, looks like
before we get started, it really would be helpful to meet with my team, because I know I've been doing a lot of networking with stakeholders that they may not be aware of. And I don't know what they've done. So I think it would be really helpful. Could we maybe just have 5 minutes with our team before we go out to talk to other teams so that we're all calibrated to the work that we've done with each other? Would that be okay?
Melissa says yes. So.
Okay, thank you. That would be helpful.
All right, so we'll just spend, we'll do like about 4 minutes of just with our team for a second to kind of get on the same page.
Thank you.
And if you don't need that, then this is a good time to go get a drink if you want to. But so what we'll do is, like I said, we're going to go back to our breakout rooms. Even if your team is all in the same room, please go to your breakout room just so that we can make sure that our consulting coaches can join. So we'll see you back here in about 4 minutes. So
Thank you.
thank you, Candace. Okay.
So Katie or Melissa, I'm thinking Freedom Prep hasn't joined. Is that?
You're not seeing anyone here from Freedom Prep?
No.
Let me look and see who should be here. I didn't receive any word from them that they were not coming. So
Just let me know. I mean, if they're on there and I'm not seeing, they're not going to the breakout rooms or anything. And they weren't there when we were introducing for sure.
So let me just look quickly, Jamie, and see. Whoops. If I'm seeing any individual names.
Melissa, we're just gonna give them like 1 more minute.
Okay, I'll close the rooms then. Let's see. Brandon, I'm not seeing. John Tusher, Tammy, Brooke, Altamirano, Kelly Clove. You're right, I'm not seeing any of them, Jamie. I'll email them and just see if there was a problem, okay? Thank you for letting me know.
Melissa, you're gonna set up the networking groups just to, okay.
Yeah, so as soon as everyone's back, I'll recreate random groups for people to go to.
Cool.
And maybe we ought to bump it down to like 12 minutes just so that we don't short our speaker.
Yep.
Thank you, my friend. Okay, we should have everyone populating back in.
All right. Welcome back. I hope you were able to get the insights that you needed to. And yeah, just here we go. We're gonna move forward and we're gonna take just a few minutes. What was it, Melissa? What did we say? 12 minutes, something like that. Okay. 12 minutes to talk with our random groups that we're gonna be, I say random, I mean, that means like, it's just gonna be people, a very heterogeneous group of people that you don't get to see every day. And what we'd like to do is just to kind of gain some insights. I'm going to put this in the chat. This is matching up with the slide that Melissa's sharing, but I want you to have it moving forward. That these are the questions we'd like you to discuss with your I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with words this morning, heterogeneous groups from across the state of how you've garnered stakeholder support through getting their feedback, integrating that feedback. How's it going for getting that support? And then how has that impacted your plans as far as implementing a STEM culture in your school? So what I'd like to see before Melissa she's opened the groups. Okay. So if you have any questions or concerns, just share it with me now. And if not, please go to your group and share those insights.
Sorry, Katie, I didn't mean to.
No, you're good.
I'm trying to anticipate what you said and I anticipated the wrong thing.
You're all good. All right, so it may mean that those of you who are in conference rooms might have to break up for a second or just contribute as a group to the other people. All right, I'm just gonna.
Melissa, would you like us to jump into one of the rooms too? I got invited to go to room 2. Is that, or would you
Yeah.
prefer
Not
they talk?
necessarily.
Okay.
But I'm just trying to make sure the numbers are making sense because only got a few people.
Yeah, I'm moving a couple of them.
Okay. So 12 minutes. Do you have a timer going or?
I do not, but that
I'll
would be,
make one now. I'll make one now.
okay, thank you.
And I'll send a little warning message too.
Thank you, Katie.
Okay, Melissa, in about 30 seconds, I'll just close the rooms. That'll give them a minute to come on back.
That's great, Katie.
And then you're good for the next part. All right, welcome back, everybody. I hope that you got some great insights from one another and probably saw that probably doesn't matter what you are, there are some universal predictable things that can come up as we are seeking the input from our stakeholders. And I appreciate you engaging with each other through that breakout room. We're going to transition now to our principle 2, and I'm going to kick it over to Melissa for this next part.
Thanks, Katie. So hopefully you had a chance to kind of hear others' perspectives in your breakout room and kind of see what they're doing. Maybe found some things that you're like, ooh, I like that idea. I'm going to bring that up when we have our discussion after lunch. That might be something we want to add or consider. So really, our networking time is to help us kind of see what's out there and think, what about this might be useful in our context? So we're going to look now at what our focus for today is. We've been using as a foundational document the STEM to the Fourth paper, The Power of Collaboration for Change. And within that are 3 principles that we're using to help us as we think about STEM and what would we want a STEM vision to be in our context. So last time we talked about principle 1, or the idea of advancing learning in each individual discipline. And you went to different breaks that you could select to help you better think, how could I, what could I do to have effective tier 1 instruction? What might that look like? Today, we're going to focus on principle 2, or this idea that STEM education should provide logical and authentic connections between and across the individual STEM disciplines. So that's what we're looking at today, is where are those natural and authentic connections that will really support STEM education. So we're going to take just a couple of minutes. I'm going to put in the chat the link to assignment number 2. Oops, hang on. Let me hit enter on chat. There we go. It wasn't letting me come out. Okay, so this should help you open up assignment number 2, or you can get it through the slides. In that, you will see places where you can take notes to really make your conversation after lunch with your team more effective. So during this first couple of minutes, you'll have a little bit of time to look at principle 2 and think about, so what does that mean for our situation? What might I want to bring up in our discussion after lunch as a team? Then we're going to hear from Dr. Carrie Schneider, and there's a spot for you to put your notes. So what insights do I have during this presentation? What should I bring back to the team that I want to remember to think, oh, we might want to put this in our vision, or we might want to add a goal to our action plan to help us meet our vision based off of what Dr. Schneider shows us. So I'm going to give you just a couple of minutes. We don't need very long. And let's look at, so if you're in the slideshow, it's slides 21 and 22, this principle number 2 of about the idea of authentic integration. So we have these 2 slides, or you can access the document through the link in the slideshow. So let's take 2 minutes individual time, read through it, start filling out assignment number 2 about what's insightful to you, and then we'll come back together and have a couple of minutes to maybe break for a minute before we get into our national presenter. So it's 9:52. Let's take till about 9:54 to read through these components and put your insights into assignment 2.
Melissa, is it just you and I on right now?
No, everyone is here just kind of doing some individual reading time for a minute.
Okay. All right, my friends, we looked at this document extensively on day 1. So hopefully this gave you a couple of minutes to just kind of reconnect with this principle 2 and put down some things, insights that are important to you that you want to remember for your team to talk about. What we are going to do now is we are going to take about a 10-minute break. So we'll come back at 10:04. And I'll introduce Dr. Carrie Schneider to you at 10:04, and we'll spend the next hour, the next 2 hours with him. We're lucky to have him. So this is your time that if you need a break, take it now so that you don't miss a minute of time with him. So let's come back at 10:04, have a good break, have assignment 2 ready to go to put your insights for Dr. Schneider, and we'll get going at 10:04. Okay, Dr. Schneider. Hi, I'm here.
Thank you for being here. We're excited to
Sure.
have you. So I'm thinking that, do we want to change over the PowerPoint right now? And maybe we can add this slide to the front of yours just so that I can make sure that everyone knows who you are.
Sure.
Okay.
I want to test and make sure my system works. That's kind of the most important thing for me. And you can just read this too. You don't have to have the slide, but.
But it's such a great picture. Okay, let's pull. I'm going to give you access to share your screen.
All right.
Let's see.
Thank you.
Okay, so I just made you a co-host. I'm going to stop share and you should be able to share.
All right.
Okay, so this is the screen. I'd like to have a thumbnail with me in it if possible. I don't know. I'm looking at the right hand.
I tried to work on that, but I was not able to make that.
Ah, okay. Well, we can just do it this way then. Maybe it'd be best though, just to start out with me in person. And then I'll go ahead and share or something like that.
Perfect.
All right, so I'm going to stop sharing. Well, let me just make sure it will work. By the way, yeah, it works fine. Okay. All right, so I will stop sharing.
Dr. Schneider, I also have the YouTube video pulled up that I can share and play it for everyone.
Oh, good.
Decide you want that at the
Yeah.
end. It's available for you if you want it.
Okay, so this is one of the things, if there's extra time, we could have some fun with that. So
Great.
not necessary. Okay, good.
So how is the weather in the Northwest today?
It looks like a typical Portland day. It's overcast right now, but it's not wet, not yet. Normally, this time of year, about half the days are drizzly and the other half are sunny. And we think, springtime is here, trees are blossoming, and then the rain comes. So, but it's just kind of
I
nice.
lived in the Northwest for a while.
Whereabouts?
That I lived in the Dalles.
Oh, really? I did a lot of observation on a high school project that I was working on in the Dalles. Really, really good first year teacher there, developing engineering activities for a science course, and did many, many trips down the gorge. Oh, it was such a beautiful trip down and back.
You just don't want to do it in freezing rain.
Yeah, right. Or when the wind is whipping.
Yes. I also lived in Longview, Washington for a while.
So I love the Pacific Northwest. I really do.
It is
And-
a beautiful place.
And Utah is a lovely state. I've done projects there. I've driven through it before on a cross-country trip once, and it's just, the scenery is just amazing.
It is very, very beautiful. The West is just it's a lovely place to be. Although my son-in-law is from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and it's beautiful there too. So I guess we just live in a great country. We have beautiful scenery.
You know, if I think of it, I've been doing a lot of oil paintings, and I did one. I've been doing paintings of images I've taken from the air on cross-country flights. I'm pretty sure one of them is Salt Lake. And if I think of it, I don't forget all about this. I'm going to send it to you and ask you where that is, because when you're up in the air, you don't know what you're taking pictures of. So
That'd be cool. I would love
yeah.
My husband does that all the time.
Mm.
So he would find that fascinating as well.
Yeah, I'll probably send you the catalog from my last show and ask you to check out the painting on page something or other. And
Oh, that'd be cool.
all right.
Love that.
It was helpful to see the your note to everybody. So now I get a sense that people are in all sorts of different situations. It's probably fair to say that a few people won't be able to talk with someone next to them, or is that right? Or are they all able to be in touch with their team?
I mean, if we put them in breakout rooms, they can be in touch with their team.
No, let's not go through that. I wanted to say at this point, stop, and if they can't talk with someone, they'll make notes. That's fine. Yeah.
Yeah. And they have a note place to take insights from what they're thinking. So that might be a good time for them to just jot that down in their insights for their assignment.
Good idea. Well, I like your background, but for um, for the organization, it should be filled with kids, I think.
Well, there's some discussion. I tell them, I feel like I'm a used car salesman. It looks like I'm in a used dealership and I'm just really good. I've sold all the cars.
Yeah, I think you need to have a new picture back there with lots of kids in it, you know. And
I don't disagree.
Hmm.
So, but so far there's this and one that looks like we're in a padded room. So I opted for the sales,
Yeah.
that dealership.
I always prefer to have the Zooms with, you see where people are actually located. You see what their offices are like. You see what the knickknacks are and, you know, or what pictures there are on the wall. So,
Hey, Melissa,
Yes.
Melissa, if you get a
Hi, Sarah.
moment, which I'm sure you'll be able to, good morning. Could you add Danny Brown to the Canvas course? I just sent you an email. She's the new
Yes.
principal of North Elementary. She's right here.
Fabulous.
Hi.
Woo!
Thank you.
So she's
That
attending
is
with us. but
I'm
she
living
doesn't-
through Ray right now.
Yes, she doesn't have access to the material. So if you happen to have just one moment of downtime, would it be okay if you added her?
Yes. So I will, during Dr. Schneider's presentation, I'll get her added. That's wonderful. And also I know that your consulting coach, John Hughes, will be excited as well. So you'll want to, maybe Sarah, you can help make that connection between the two of them.
Yeah, we have.
Yeah,
We've
we
got that
introduced
part.
and have an
You're on
email
top
at
of
least going
things.
through.
And you look really
you.
familiar. We've probably seen each other at functions because you look familiar.
Coaching class, I'm the literacy coach currently. Where else? I've only been in Cedar 3 years in Utah, so I feel like everyone looks familiar still, and I have a hard time remembering like, okay, that's social, kids, work. So I'm sure we'll see lots more of each other.
All right, everyone, welcome back. It is 10:04 and we want to get going because we have the fabulous Dr. Carrie Schneider here with us today. Just some background on him. He's a visiting scholar in the Graduate School of Education at Portland State University. And he has interests in engineering education and practice. He served as the consultant to the National Research Council committee that developed the framework for K-12 science education. Hang on. I'm gonna come off of background just so you can see it. I'm gonna choose none. Dr. Schneider will like this. You'll see what my background really is.
ah, yeah.
Here's the framework and it's well loved. And also I became familiar with him through reading this book that he's an author of that I found really helpful. So STEM Lesson Essentials. He didn't tell me to plug that, by the way, that was me plugging it. I'd read his book and then kind of looked into him more, and he's done a ton of things, vast knowledge, lots of experience. He also worked as an engineering lead on the writing team for the Next Generation Science Standards. So we are very lucky to have him here. I will turn the time over to him and then he'll introduce himself a little bit more and then we'll share his screen.
Okay, thank you, Melissa. Am I ready to share a screen yet? Okay, here we go. All right. There we are. Do I have the right, is it working?
It is, looks great.
Okay, good. Well, hi, everybody. I'm really delighted to have the opportunity to do this. Given the pandemic, this was postponed last year. So this is like 2 years in the planning. So a lot of anticipation, and here we go for a couple of hours. I love the paper that you've been working with about the power of collaboration for change. It's a really excellent paper. And what I'm going to be doing today is really focusing on principle 2 and trying to sort of put some flesh on the bones. And so I have a 4-part presentation today. First of all, what really are we talking about when we're talking about science, technology, and engineering? And there are lots of definitions out there, and I'm going to share the ones that I've found most helpful. And those are the ones that you'll find in a framework for K-12 science education. And that's the document on which Utah's science standards are based. I'll also be talking a little bit about math standards. My primary area is science. Astronomy has always been my greatest love, but in more recent years, I focus more on engineering. And I'm going to mention in part number 2, what do engineering and technology activities look like in the classroom? Part 3 will be how your students can benefit from these connections. And I'll be talking a little bit later about a research study where a colleague and I have reviewed more like about 500 different research studies to try to understand really how engineering dovetails with science and math. And then finally, which methods are most effective, both in schools and also beyond the school day. All my life, I've kind of had one foot firmly planted in school systems and another foot in after-school programs. And I think both are really essential for a full education. So let me quickly do a sound check. Melissa, is my voice clear? Connection good?
Great.
All right.
Things good.
All right, then we will move along with part 1. So science is the traditional sciences: physics, chemistry, biology, and more recently, earth, space, and environmental sciences. Broadly conceived, science is really a process of asking questions about the world. A lot of people say the natural world, but there are scientific studies of metallurgy, which is not the natural world. So it's really whenever you're really asking a question and investigating to find the answer. And in science, there are right answers and wrong answers. Now, you may not always know which is which, because there's a lot of uncertainty in science, but it's a process of seeking the truth. Engineering, the definition is any engagement in a systematic process or practice of design to achieve solutions to particular human problems or meeting human needs. So in engineering, there is no right answer. The whole process, though, is really important to find the best possible answer. To do that, you need to know what the problem is you're trying to solve or the need you're trying to meet. So, so that process is really important. Now, often in presentations of an engineering design, a lot of time is spent on the process of design. I'm not going to do that today because there are a lot of systems out there. I want to emphasize the idea of systematic and iterative. So the idea is you have to always be clear about what is the problem you're trying to solve, and always go back to it and be willing to redefine it if you find you're trying to solve the wrong problems. And then brainstorming ideas and not getting fixated on any one idea, but rather come up with a lot of different ways of solving the problem and using a systematic process to determine, well, really, which is the best solution we should move forward with. And then developing some sort of prototype or some attempt to solve it, and then saying, look, have we solved the problem we set out to do? Have we changed the problem? Do we have a good solution? And finally, communicating that. So that's the nature and process of engineering. Now, the word technology has shifted over the last 20 or 30 years. It used to include engineering, and there was a lot of fuzziness about the terms engineering and technology. So today, as defined in the K-12 science education, in the framework for K-12 science education, technology is all the ways that, all the types of human-made systems and processes, not just digital technologies, not just electronics. So it's Neanderthals had an amazing system of technology for making stone tools. So it's however humans have interacted with the environment. I once asked my boss, who was a professor of engineering, I said, beavers are amazing at creating beaver dams. Are they engineers too? Because they're changing the world to meet their needs. And he had an excellent answer. He said, yep, that's beaver engineering. So, so the ways that we change the world, and I wouldn't even limit it to humans. But what's a little bit different about beavers is they do the same thing all the time. Human engineers are able to be much more innovative. That adds a level of creativity to it to come up with different kinds of solutions. And then the technology is really the result. So if you see a technology, some engineer developed it. May not be a licensed certified engineer, but it's a process of engineering and all of our students can engineer. So I'm going to move on. We're going to do this activity first. So this is an activity that you will all do. If you're with someone else, I want you to compare notes. If you're alone, take out your insights and your notes. And I want you to do this. Imagine what would happen if all the technologies around you were to disappear. What would you see? And I'm going to stop this for a full minute and just a minute of silence so you guys can talk about it. So go ahead, I'm starting my timing. If you have some discovery you made, write it in the chat. So, Melissa, do we have any comments in the chat about this?
Yes, we're having people say I wouldn't have a job. Just natural topographies of the earth. We'd have just the natural world, weather, life, light. I would tell my students that the T in STEM stands for tools, so they don't only consider things they plug in. We'd quickly learn what it was like for Adam and Eve, and yet we'd start problem solving right away. So I think we're figuring out there wouldn't be a lot.
That's wonderful. Adam and Eve, now remember the fig leaf was the first technology. So, when kids start to giggle, you realize they're really getting it at that point. Because fabric, after all, is a technology. So that's really good. And usually, I'll tell you this, I wouldn't be here. And often we think about medical technologies as being so important for preservation of life. But actually, it's clean water is what made the biggest difference, because back in the beginning of the 20th century, life expectancy was about 45 years. Now, people did achieve quite older ages, but on average, it was very low because of cholera. One year in Chicago, I think 90,000 people died early in the century. So, so all of these technologies are really, really critical. So, okay, we're going to move on now. So that's really a clear definition of how we're going to be using technology. And these are just some examples. Cooking and baking is definitely a technology. Clothing, medicine, things like writing is a technology. And if you really want to get your kids thinking, what about speech and language? Is that a technology? I'm just going to leave it there for a moment and not try to answer that question, because again, if you can get your kids really talking and thinking about things rather than just coming to conclusions, that's really ideal. So, I mentioned this research study. So a colleague and I examined all these research studies, and it took about 5 years. And we decided about 3 years ago that we would winnow it to only studies that actually provided data on kids, what kids knew, what they could do, and what they could learn about engineering. So, so the focus today obviously is about engineering integrated with science and also math, and I'll be getting to that in a little bit. So one of the most interesting series of studies, and there are about a dozen of these studies, and this one summarizes a couple of thousand kids, elementary students, and their understanding of technology. And so if you look at this chart, the gray bars represented what kids thought about technology before they had a course on it or a unit of study on it. And then the black bars is what happens after they've spent a couple of weeks learning about technology and engineering. So things like kids are given little pictures and they told to circle the pictures if they represent technology. And items like birds, dandelions, oak trees, volcanoes, lightning, typically kids won't circle those, so they get that right. And on the far right, electrical technologies, they get that right as well. So keyboards, game controllers, M3P players, cell phones, laptops, those are all technologies and they know that. The ones in the middle are the really interesting ones. Simple technologies like sandals, baskets, brooms, handheld fan, just fanning yourself, or running shoes. Very few kids understand that those are technologies. But then after a little bit of instruction, more than 60% of the kids get it. Oh yeah, it's the person created that for me or for themselves. Mechanical technologies are much broader. Most kids don't think of rollerblades as technologies. Bicycles, maybe a little bit more because it's more mechanical, or wind-up toys, pianos, windmills. You can see there's a difference depending on what the particular item is. But then again, after instruction, if you look across the board, kids begin to understand what is and is not a technology. So in the Utah standards, okay, what engineering is defined as is a process of improving or creating new technologies to solve a problem. It's a systematic, creative, and iterative, as I mentioned earlier, and it's a multi-stage process that involves these different stages: generating ideas, modeling, testing, and then arguing from evidence. And this last part of it, arguing from evidence, is really important because just as in science, you're trying to answer in a question and you've got evidence in support of your claim, in engineering, you're arguing that this solution is better than that solution. Or this is the problem we should really be solving because that's one that's going to really make a difference. These are all activities actually that we're looking at from an after-school program. The one on modeling is in particular interest because that particular one was modeling the idea of a thermal mass in a building to try to save on energy. That's a large building, a building with certain big walls that will absorb heat during the day and then give off that heat at night, and which materials are best for that. So this is a controlled experiment to determine that these materials are heated up and then cooled off, and the kids measure how much thermal energy they retain. So you do controlled experiments for science and you do it for engineering. The important thing is, what's the goal? If you're trying to make something or fix something or improve a technology, then it's engineering. And in many cases, that's the only way you can tell the difference. And I'll explain a little later why it's important. The main point, though, is you want to be always intentional about your teaching. If you're intentional and you know what your objectives are, or you know what it is that you want your students to learn, you'll have a much better chance of being successful at that. And in time, the kids need to understand also and be clear. Am I answering a question or am I solving a problem? So this is a quote from from Utah Standards. And I just highlighted a little part of it, is that the standards should be considered to exist not as an island unto themselves, but as part of an integrated, comprehensive, and holistic educational experience. Now, at the elementary level, this is obvious. You've got to integrate science with all of the subjects, social studies and language arts. For social studies, you know, we have kids learn about the different ages, the Stone Age, the Iron Age, and the Bronze Age, and the Information Age. These are all technologies. I remember one day I finally discovered that, that when we think about it, it's really the way people live their lives is so dependent on the technologies that they have available to them. And that's true today. The way we live our lives, go through a whole day, is depends on the technologies that we have available to us. So it's important that kids be able to read about engineering and science and so forth, and write about it, especially write about it and so forth. So integration is important. And the rest of my presentation will really be all about, well, how do you do it? We're going to get to how to do it pretty soon. But before I go too far, I just want to mention the relevance to mathematics. Now, my specialty, of course, is science, because that's where I've come from. But mathematics is also really important. And in your mathematics Utah Core State Standards for Math, I highlighted this statement that mathematical understanding and procedural skills are equally important, and both are accessible using mathematical tasks of sufficient richness. So what is a task of sufficient richness? In my view, I think it's a task where they're trying to accomplish something. And so the task itself has meaning, not just as an example of, or as a vehicle for teaching the mathematics, but for either supporting a claim in inquiry and science, or for accomplishing a goal in engineering. And one of the things I find so interesting is that mathematics and science both claim the same turf. They both claim that it's all about problem solving. And yes, there are some shades of difference in what they will call a problem. But nonetheless, there is some problem to solve. It's a challenge. And if it's an interesting one, kids will get involved. If it's yet another exercise, you know, the two trains leave the station at different times, blah, blah, blah. It's not going to be very interesting. If the problem is going to be how do you prevent a train crash by doing the same calculation, it's much more interesting. And preventing a train crash, of course, is an engineering problem. So they both claim modeling. They both claim measurement, data analysis, graphing and statistics, geometry. There are a number of these different areas. Now, maybe binomial equations is primarily math, and certain other areas are primarily science. But this crossover is really important. And I'm going to tell you a quick little story about why and how it's important in my own life. In mathematics, we had XY plots, and I find them very helpful because I'm more of a visual learner. And all sorts of things are graphed to understand different types of shapes and equations and functions in particular. What's a function? What's not a function? You always graph on the XY plane or in the polar coordinate plane. And then one day I realized that what I've been learning about in science about dependent and independent variables were X's and Y's. The X is typically the independent variable, and then the Y is the dependent variable. If you set a value of X, then you find the value of Y, and then you plot it on the graph. I mean, I was a graduate student when I realized that. So the 2 points I want to make about it. So it's very important for math and science teachers to coordinate their definitions, goals, and outcomes. So don't just meet within your departments at the high school level or at the middle school level. Be sure that you're clear on what the common goals are and work together to find for the science teacher to include meaningful mathematics in their science teaching, and in their and mathematics have meaningful problems in science and engineering. So just recently, I've been actually developing some astronomy lessons for a publisher, and I'm trying to communicate how vast the galaxy is. And so I have them imagine that they're going to be that they can fly anywhere in the universe if they want, in this really, really fast jet plane that travels 2.5 times the speed of sound. And it only takes maybe a day or two to fly to the moon. Isn't that amazing? So the sun, probably not much further. Well, no, it's more than a year to get to the sun. To travel 1 light year is, man, I forgot the number now, it's something like thousands of years. And to the nearest star, it's thousands of years. To get across the galaxy, we're talking many, 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 many generations. So even if they could fly in the Starship Enterprise at warp 10, it would still take 10,000 years to get to the other side of the galaxy. So numbers, numeracy, you can't really understand the vastness of space without some mathematical grounding. So the science and math are really essential to each other. I often find that, and this is, correct me if I'm wrong, but science teachers in particular recognize the importance and value of math because they can't communicate their ideas without it. Math teachers don't necessarily feel that they need engineering and science to make their problems more meaningful. But I hope that after today, that will never be the case. So be sure to have some communication. And at the elementary level, you have the great advantage of having all subjects. I know it's difficult to do that, but where you can weave them together, that's really a valuable thing to do. So let's move, oopsie daisy, let's move on. There we go. So this next set is about the practices of science and engineering. And I want to use these next few slides to emphasize the difference again in the two. So asking questions and defining problems is the first practice that you'll find in the framework. In fact, pages 50 to 54 of the framework. My dog-eared version mentions this, that science always begins with a question about a phenomenon. Why is the sky blue? What causes cancer? And engineering begins with a problem, need, or desire. Suggests an engineering problem that needs to be solved, or some technological solution. Obviously, not all problems can be solved through engineering, but for those that can, that's what this first practice is all about. And in science, actually, it's pretty hard to teach kids to ask good questions. It's a little easier in engineering to teach kids to define good problems because they're concrete situations you're trying to solve. But both are important practices. Developing and using models, science often involves construction and use of a wide variety of models and simulations to develop explanations. Again, usually about natural phenomena. So what's going on here? And to look at the whole system. and sometimes to actually, very often to build a mathematical model or a computational model to figure out what's really going on. Engineers use models all the time because they need to know if what they're building is going to work. So a wind tunnel, for example, is a way to test a model to see if how this particular shape behaves. And in both cases, models have their limitations. So a small airplane model in a wind tunnel doesn't test everything about that airplane, but it does test shape. And then, of course, it has to be retested again at a larger scale. But you don't waste resources on building full-size airplanes just to test the outer envelope. So, so models are really important in both, but for very different reasons. So planning and carrying out investigations, I mentioned this earlier. Scientists always want to look back and say, now what's the question I'm trying to ask? And what kind of investigation will help? Is it a controlled experiment, a field observations? What's going to work? Engineers oddly use field observations as well. If something like a grocery cart is not, has some problems, it's very expensive and breaks all the time and doesn't really meet people's needs, you got to go out there and watch how people use these things, or whatever it is. You often need to see how the current technology is used in the field before you can improve it. And often you have to talk to people. Engineers always need to talk to people to find out how the product they're trying to improve really needs to be improved. So hopefully, if you're doing engineering with your kids, they will be talking with each other and with others to find out really understand what the needs are. There we go. So analyzing interpret data, obviously scientists are going to analyze the results of their investigations. Engineers do the same, but again, a different purpose. Using mathematics and computational thinking. So in science, they're fundamental tools for representing physical variables and their relationships. I'll give you an example in a little while about how you would, that difference in engineering and in science, but where you can have kids recognize that relationship, as with the XY story I mentioned earlier, it's really, really valuable for them to say, oh, I'm using mathematics and I'm trying to use it to answer this question, or I'm using mathematics to understand this relationship so I can build this device. So constructing explanations and designing solutions. Now, all 8 of the practices are really parallel, but there are 2 where there's a bigger distinction between science and engineering. The first one I mentioned is asking questions and defining problems. This is the other one. This is the flip side of that coin, constructing explanations and answer those questions, and designing solutions to those problems that you've defined. So the goal of science is always to explain something. You've figured something out. You've got the right answer. Here's how I understand that. And here is where you often bring in the arguing from evidence. Not only do I understand the phenomenon, but here's the evidence for it. And in engineering, when you solve the problem or you meet the need, here again, here's the evidence, because here's how the new or improved technology now solves the problem. So, so arguing from evidence, I won't mention this again. They're important for both. And then finally, obtaining, evaluating, communicating information. So science can't advance if scientists are unable to communicate their findings clearly and persuasively, or to learn from others. But there's another dimension to communication, and that's finding out what others have done, going online. And how do you pursue research online is really something kids need to learn. And it's one of the areas where today it's really important, because there's a lot of misinformation about all sorts of science, including the most important area of science, and that is understanding disease and vaccinations, and whether or not one should be vaccinated, and what are the studies, and where do you look for that information. So So this, I would say, is perhaps one of the most important of all of the practices. So engineers can produce newer improved technologies if the advantages of their designs are not communicated clearly and persuasively, but also you need to find out how others have solved the problem so you don't reinvent the wheel. All right, so we're going to stop and take questions about, we're about halfway through so far. Melissa, do we want to have people write their questions in the chat, or do you want to call on people? How would you like to do that?
Well, that'd be great. If anyone has a question, drop it into the chat that you would like Dr. Snyder to kind of address so far. I like that there's a couple of resources that have been put in. I put in the framework document where you can access it for free. And also there's another one with IDEO's new shopping cart from ABC News. That is an interesting video. I've seen that, so thanks for sharing that. I really liked the idea of thinking about authentic problems and where do science and mathematics authentically meet? What could we really help students see that is in their world, understand their world? What are some questions that you have for Dr. Snyder so far, maybe about the interactions between math and science and engineering and technology? See, Candace says we have siloed so much of our content in elementary schools. What are some strategies that can support administrators and teachers in breaking systemic barriers?
So that's a wonderful, wonderful question. And of course, there's no single answer to it. And that's why brainstorming is so important. And the answer is quite different at the different grade levels. So starting at the high school level, that's where the silos are strongest and hardest to break through. So one thing, and this is why you've got this document in front of you, it's about collaboration and working together. So let me respond to the answer about to the question about how do you integrate, for example, engineering into whatever science you're working on at the high school level. So I asked myself, look, I'm talking about medicine, for example, or biology. Where is biology important in the real world? It's through medicine. And what are the medical technologies that have been developed that help us understand biological systems? Or agriculture is another area. So if we want kids to understand photosynthesis, for example, where is photosynthesis important? And I'm not talking about just an isolated lab you do in your classroom where you stick some of the plants in the closet and so forth, but to get yield. And often a collaboration with 4-H is especially helpful because you can find expertise about how to address the question or how to improve the soil. So, so thinking about the subject you want to teach, asking what are the practical values of that in the real world, lead you to other collaborations in your community. That's the high school level. The middle school level, science teachers cannot be specialists in just one field of science, at least unless it's a very big middle school. But in most cases, I found that when I was teaching middle school, that you need to know everything. You need to be able to teach life science as well as astronomy and space science and so forth. And so So naturally you reach out for help. I remember I contacted a beekeeper because I really didn't know anything about pollination and bees. And at that time, beekeeping was so important for agriculture where I was located. So reaching out, getting help. And then also we had meetings it was a small school. So we had meetings every single week at the same time with all the teachers, the different subject areas. And that's where we talked about, and I think that's where I finally came to the recognition that social studies was all about technology and technological change and issues about why one civilization or what happened, for example, when there was a clash between the old world and the new world, and why so many people died of disease in those days and so forth. So, so there are natural collaborations, and if you're looking for them, you'll find them. Now, I don't know as much about the elementary level. I don't have the patience to teach young children. I wish I did. My hat goes off to those teachers who can really teach and meet their needs every day. Do a little bit better with the upper elementary, but there the opportunities for collaboration are much better because you're at least collaborating with yourself and exchanging ideas with your colleagues. So one of the studies that we ran across was for fourth graders, and the kids would read a short story and they would talk about the characters and the problem that the character was encountering. Before they would finish the story, they would brainstorm different ideas to help the character solve the problem. And they would say, well, okay, what problem is the character actually having? So, and they would write about their ideas. So that was doing engineering, actually, through literature. One of the projects I've worked on in California, where they're trying to implement new standards, found that English teachers were, when they realized that, boy, there's an opportunity to teach science through hands-on that needed an ELA part to it. They were hungry for that because it would get the kids much more involved. And getting the kids engaged is what it's all about, whatever subject you teach. So if it's real world, if it's authentic problems, or meeting real needs that the kids care about or their parents care about, that's kind of the answer to that question. So we have a little more time. Let's see if there are other questions.
Hey, Dr. Snyder, there's another one that says, Sarah says, please talk a little bit about how to assess the standards in an integrated project.
Okay, so I believe in performance assessment, not asking kids what they know or not just, fill in the bullets and so forth. And so it's hard. It takes time. It takes time to actually look at what they've done. And also with engineering in particular, or science inquiry, you really want kids to be working as team members. So that adds another layer that's really difficult. So how do you do that? Okay, well, a lot of different ways. And there's formative assessment, where you're just trying to get a sense of how the kids are learning and how can I continuously improve instruction. That, in a sense, is the most important way. Then there's summative assessment. Okay, we're done with this unit. I want to improve it for next year. I have to get grades. And that's really quite different. Your standards in science, and probably in mathematics as well, involve what are their performance assessments, because they're performance standards. What can kids do at the end of instruction? And so there you have to set up situations for them and to see how well they do what they do. So I'm working on, so first of all, let me get this at the different levels. For formative assessment, you want to look at a project they've done and not give them a test, but assess the quality of what they've done and see what worked, what didn't work, and what you need to improve about their instruction. For that, a rubric is very helpful. So you try to be clear to begin with, or partway through, because it's probably an iterative process yourself, because a rubric is itself a technology, to say, okay, what is ideal? Well, let's say, what does very good performance look like? And describe it as clearly as possible. And then you go up one from there. Well, what's perfect performance? And then what's less ideal, and less and less. And you try to have for each row of your rubric different dimensions of what they're doing. If it's engineering design, you would say, how well did they define the problem? How well did they brainstorm? It may include teamwork. And by teamwork, what do you mean by teamwork? Are they listening to others? Are they sharing ideas or materials? You know, it will depend on the grade level and so forth. The most important thing in writing a rubric is that you become clear about your objectives and how you become clear about watching how they do. And you can use the rubric just by watching in class. You can use the rubric by looking at their product. For the youngest children, of course, the best thing is to watch what they do and listen to what they do and take notes. And for older kids, you actually will give them, you score their rubric. And in some cases, it's a group score. In other cases, they're individual scores. Now, for summative assessment, what you care about is not so much what did they do, what was the quality of their work, but what did they learn from it? And there you want to look at a near transfer situation. By near transfer, I mean a different problem, but one which you would expect them to transfer what they learned very easily. So I've been working with some colleagues on an assessment of engineering mindset. And engineering mindset involves both affective and cognitive components. So the cognitive ones are, can they solve an engineering problem? So this is for middle school kids. And we say, this veterinarian has a problem. She can't get the big heavy animals up onto the table. How, so what would you need to do to help her? That's a very open-ended question to get at their problem definition. So, and then you ask her and ask them, so what ideas do you have? What materials would you use? How could science or math be helpful to you? How would you find out if your idea worked? And there you're looking for, well, at how they think through a problem, if they've been doing this sort of thing. Now, for affective, you really need to do a questionnaire, how they think about themselves, and questions about, if you, when you're working on this year and you ran into problems, what did you do? How hard did you work at? What happens when you fail? How do you feel about being an engineer? So it's a lot of questions about self-identity and persistence and teamwork. And there, the best thing you can do is ask their opinions and their ideas about things. So again, you don't grade affect. Affect is all about how to get kids engaged and self-confident and so forth. But cognitive parts, if you have to produce a grade, you've got some basis to do that because you know how they are doing against the standards. Assessment is just as important as outside of school time as it is in school. So one of my other projects I've been working on and doing workshops is how do after school, what does assessment mean in after school or summer programs? And it's this idea about doing similar types of projects and seeing how kids improve in the areas that you're trying to teach, but always being aware that the goal number one is really engagement and interest. If you give them a test and they feel it's a test, you're probably going to be defeating your purpose. Now in school, it's a little bit different. You have to really, you have standards and you need to meet those standards. So the testing is probably going to be more obvious. So anyway, that's a lot. I've kind of been rambling about that. But assessment is extremely important because that's really the only way that you know what your kids are learning. And it's always, I think of assessment not so much as how the kids are doing, but how am I doing as a teacher in helping my children meet their standards or meet the objectives, things that I want them to learn, or the things I want them to think about, and the kind of the ideas and feelings that I would like them to develop about the subject I'm teaching. So let's take one more question, if there is one, or a comment. If someone has some comments, those are really valuable as well.
So Dr. Schneider, there are really thoughtful comments and questions. Some of the maybe concerns are this idea of administrators understanding how to evaluate this type of learning. There's some concern about that. And then there's a question about how can we approach teachers and administrators to understand this vision and help deploy it within our school, district, state.
Let me get to that one right now, because Melissa, you are doing that. As I understand, we've got administrators in the audience right now. And when there are workshops on implementations of your state standards in mathematics and science, it's really important that they're there in day one. And they need to recognize that what's really important is the learning process. So it's also important that there be you have some means of assessment that you as a teacher really believe in and can share with your administrator. And sometimes I find it helpful in a workshop situation to get the administrator to actually take the assessment. You know, and in particular, some of these scenario-based assessments are really helpful. By the way, one of the things I've worked on is NAEP, National Assessment of Educational Progress. It's the only assessment that's given across the country to samples of schools. No kids or schools are rated with it, but it's a way for to find out how kids in different states are doing and comparing those. And in technology, and then there's a technology and engineering literacy assessment where there are online scenario-based items. And you can search for that. And in science as well, there are online scenario-based items. And you can test yourself and see how well you do. And you can have your kids go online and use the same assessments and find out how they do. So it's a very good tool to convince administrators. If you can get them to take this assessment and share the results, they can get a sense of the sorts of important outcomes that need to be measured and how to go about doing that, so that they'll have a better understanding of what it is that you're trying to accomplish with your kids. But the administrators need to be involved to begin with, because otherwise they bring to the table whatever they've learned, their own educational background, which may not be different, which may be quite different from the standards as we have them today. So give me another one and one more, and then we'll move on.
Okay, so let's see. We have a comment from Jolie. She says, I appreciate how using rich tasks and quality performance assessments allows for this idea that you're talking about. Love how Dr. Schneider and this team is elevating the reasoning and thinking over answer getting in this discussion, and how rubrics support this work. And then Candace says, I've been bumping up against this assessment piece quite a bit. Funders want to have a way to know if the funding changed outcomes. RISE is not going to cut it for STEM competencies. RISE is a state summative assessment.
Mm-hmm.
I liked the way that Carrie framed this with cognitive and affective domains in assessment. How could we build a state capacity to recognize this in our STEM systems?
Well, so when we worked on the next generation science standards, we specifically did not include affect because we did not want to penalize kids and teachers if they weren't as enthusiastic as we wanted. So, but affect is terribly important, and it's important for you to, as a teacher, to be sensitive to. So the performance assessment that I talked about a little while ago, which is a scenario to help the veterinarian develop something for the veterinarian to get heavy animals up on the table, was criticized as, well, how do we know that that's doing what it's supposed to do? So I got a grant to actually test its validity. And so what we're doing now, we're going to have a summer, we're looking for, in fact, if any of you are planning a summer engineering camp, well, I'd love to hear from you, because we want to actually use that assessment. And we'll have two different versions, two different scenarios, one before and one after the week's engineering camp for middle school kids, and see if kids, if we will look at the camp to see what instruction was like, and then we'll see if the instrument actually shows an improvement before and after. So you really need to have the instruments to do that. And the reason that we're developing one is that we don't know of one that exists right now in the literature. So, but what's important is to develop your own means of assessment that show whether or not kids are getting meeting the objectives that you've set. And, you know, the reason why it's so important to develop these assessments is because it helps you clarify what it is you want them to learn and how you'll know that they've learned that. It's difficult. I don't, you know, I don't claim it's easy by any means, but I was teaching for many, many years before assessment was called for, and didn't realize the value of actually doing that. But I kind of developed some methods that I hadn't even identified as assessment. When assessment first came to the fore, it was all about standardized tests. And I was very, very resistant to have kids waste their time on it. But when I realized what standardized testing means is simply having the same method of assessment for everybody, so you could compare how well you're doing, how well somebody else is doing. If it's a good assessment, then it's worth doing, because it gives you information about what the kids are learning. So what's important is the assessment match the instruction. There are states where teachers are told to use the new standards, but just because the new assessments haven't been developed yet at the state level, we're going to use the old state assessments, and then we're going to judge teachers based on them. That's a nightmare. That you just can't accept that. It's so assessment really needs to match the goals of instruction. And I wish I could put that into law. I can't do that, but the important thing is for administrators to understand, if they care about implementing the states or their districts standards, then there has to be an assessment method that goes with it. And in many cases, it means putting together a small team of teachers, or teams like you have right now, to develop those that are meaningful and welcomed by the teachers and accepted by the administrators. And it's a big task, and I don't mean to minimize that at all. Okay, I think we're going to move on.
Hey,
at this
Dr.
point.
Schneider.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you would say that, because for science, for the state of Utah, we just did that. We just brought together teams of teachers for every grade and content level from kindergarten through 12 to write formative assessment science clusters. We've taken 2 years, 1 year to write them and 1 year to revise them. And it's been a fabulous experience for everyone involved, really informative for everyone that's participated.
That is fabulous. And what you've done, by the way, is you've done an engineering design process because you found a problem that you defined. You needed these assessments for formative purposes. You developed them by brainstorming ideas, and then you tested them and revised them, which is the iterative process. So before I go forward, I'm going to just share one thing about engineering and tell you why I'm emphasizing it so much. When I was in high school, well, as long as I can remember, not high school, like 5 years old, I loved astronomy. And I was just fascinated by it. And when I was in high school, I built a telescope, built a couple of telescopes, actually, ground the mirrors and everything. And the part I loved was really designing the telescope mount, because there's so many different ways you can make a telescope mount. I actually built what I thought was a portable telescope mount. And by adding all these pieces of metal to strengthen it and so forth, my portable telescope ended up being 300 pounds, but it was steady. And I realized, I thought at the time that I was doing science because I was building a telescope because I could do astronomy. But what I realized, again, when I was a graduate student, is that that was engineering in the service of science. And you can't do science without engineering. And actually, that's the second part of this talk. So we're going to actually get to that right away. So anyway, when I talk about engineering, that's why, that's the bridge for me between my interest in science and also my growing interest in engineering and mathematics. So, so this is actually the point that I was going to make, is that science and engineering are complementary. So here's a person using a binocular microscope, which I absolutely love. And some engineer designed that and built it. They probably didn't start from scratch on this one. They started with the best binary microscopes that they could, binocular microscopes that they could find, and said, well, how can we make it better, or how can we make it cheaper? So by having better equipment, scientists are able to make better discoveries. And then that leads to new improvements in engineering, because they say, well, I can sort of see it, but it's right at the limit of my vision. Can you build it to look at a magnify, 10 more times? So, so in that way, science drives engineering, but engineering also drives science, because in some cases, until the microscope was invented, scientists had no idea what was at the microscopic level, what animals and protists were, even, because nobody could see them before. So there's a wonderful book about nature of science by, I think it's called, by Stokes, called Pasteur's Quadrant. It's called that because Louis Pasteur did his discoveries about the germ theory of disease and processes like pasteurization, because he wanted to prevent disease. But we think of him as a scientist because of the fundamental discoveries he made, but his goal was to solve a problem. And and in the book, it goes, the introduction to the book, usually I don't read prefaces, but in this case, it was so important because he said he was an academic and he went around talking to the scientists in his university. And when he asked them, well, why do you do what you do? Why do you do this research? None of them said, because I'm curious. Our quintessential vision of a scientist is a curious person. They all gave a practical reason for it. So understanding cells and why they replicate because he wanted to prevent cancer, and on and on. So So the dividing line between scientists and engineers is a very, very fine line, or no, a rather fuzzy line, in fact, I'd call it that. Because often scientists are trying to solve really important problems by understanding the fundamentals, whereas engineering is actually trying to solve the problem, but often investigating the materials or the science or developing models to really understand what's going on. So if we can develop in our kids the capacity to do this, the capacity to both be curious and to really solve real problems, that's 90% of the battle, I think. So let's move on. I'm going to be talking now about actual activities and how they bridge this divide between science and engineering. And hopefully it's not, I reduce the divide and make it a blur. So there are examples. So in science, if you're doing activities, these are 3 types of activities. So make a display of salt crystals. Sounds sort of like engineering, because we want to make something that people will enjoy and look at. And the way it's done, you make a little salt solution, you put a piece of black paper there. The next morning, the solution has evaporated and you see these big cubic crystals. So the emphasis really there is on the science, looking at these crystals and understanding the nature of salt as a crystalline substance. Making a hot air balloon. And there again, it's a fun activity. Kids put a candle under it and you have this, paper balloon, and then it flies up in the air, and it's a little bit dangerous. So, but if you do it outside, it's really fun. And there it's all about air and gravity and air pressure and temperature change. So it's really, there's no engineering involved unless you really spend the time to improve the balloon so it goes up faster and you have a way of measuring changes and improvements. Making a model of the lungs is a really interesting one. I've had kids do that. It's fascinating to understand what the diaphragm does. And usually this is done with a plastic soda bottle, and you stretch a material from a balloon across the bottom. You cut it and stretch the material from a balloon across the bottom, and you have a cork with a couple of little balloons inside, and when you pull the rubber at the bottom, the little balloons inside expand, showing how your lungs expands when your diaphragm is distended. And again, it's making something. So it's a hands-on activity, it's a physical activity, but it's really about how the lungs work. It's not about engineering. So these are examples of activities that are hands-on activities. They're worth doing, but they're really about science. Now, there are also activities that are really about engineering with very little science. So the egg drop context test. How can you design something that when you drop to cradle an egg, so when I drop it from the second floor, the egg is preserved. And that's great because kids learn about different materials and cushioning mechanisms and so forth, but there's no science in it typically. I mean, you can talk about it about energy and basically what the device helps to do is to change the gravitational energy to crushing the cradle rather than the egg. So you can make arguments about energy, but it's mostly really about the engineering. Bridge building contest. How can you build a bridge that will hold the heaviest weight? Often these are books in a classroom. Building a robot. Let's build a robot. And how can we, find out, well, how does this robot work? Well, let's study it. It's mostly the connections and the electronics, perhaps. Designing a hydraulic hand. So this is using syringes that with with liquid in a tube will actually take a finger, a mechanical finger, and extend it or pull it back. And it's a wonderful activity. Kids see how robots function this way, or building and testing a trebuchet to attack a castle. These are all really, really fun activities, and they're all about engineering, but there's very, very little science involved in them. So what I want to talk about are how do you really pull them together so kids are learning about science and engineering at the same time. And so I'm going to go on to my next slide and give you this example. I've done this many, many different ways, but the idea is that you start with an engineering device, an engineering problem. And this is what gives it authenticity. So you find these in a lot of scrap yards, and we know that recycling is really important. We throw things in our recycling bin, but what happens in a recycling bin, but then what happens to them? Well, ferric metals need to be separated and need to be loaded onto a car to be taken to be smelted and turned back into useful ferric metals. And the very common thing is this crane. And there are lots of pictures on the internet about these electromagnetic cranes and how they work. And a fun activity is actually building a little electromagnet and even making a crane. In fact, I guess the reason I love this is when I was a Cub Scout, I built one. And it's so much fun to pick up all these paper clips and then you drop them when you disconnect the battery. So, but to do this, you really need to know, well, how do you make it work? Why does it work? And this is a really strong crane. So what is it that makes it strong enough to pick up, a ton of material? So I think what we called the problem is I want you to design an electronic crane, electromagnetic crane that will pick up an entire ton of ferric metal. And the kid said, what? How am I going to do that? So, well, we're going to start with a model. And so the model is a little battery with a nail and the winding of wire, and ask you the question, what's the relationship? Is it length of wire? Is it number of windings? Is it, so I give them a bunch of variables, different size nails. By the way, I made a mistake once when I was doing this, and I bought some really nice stainless steel nails. I didn't realize that a lot of stainless steel is non-magnetic. I had egg on my face that day. But you find some different iron cores that do work. And make sure you bring a permanent magnet in your pocket when you go to the hardware store this time. And anyway, so you have the kids develop, do some controlled experiments and develop a graph to better understand, well, what's really important? Is it the iron core? What about the iron core? Is it the number of windings? Is it the, and they come up with different answers. And they don't even all necessarily come to the same agreement. I remember one class where a kid said, the windings was important. Another kid said, no, the length was important. Whatever they come up with, that's the science that they discovered through their activities. And then you say, okay, now I want you to apply that to designing an electromagnetic crane that's going to pick up a ton. And by the way, during this process, if they know that the outcome is to really figure out how to pick up as much as possible, the teams will realize that if they cooperate better, they do some collaboration, they could put their batteries together and increase the electric current. And that makes a big difference. You do have to put some limits on it because too many batteries together will not only burn out your batteries quickly, but it makes the wires too hot. So once they start doing it, let them start doing it first on their own. But once they start doing it, then you need to probably limit it to about no more than 3 batteries and so forth. So at least keep your eye on that. And then when they design it, they really think about different shapes of iron cores, how they're going to do the windings. Do they do it this way or that way? And then they look back at this picture and they say, where's the wire in here? Where does the electric current come in? So they really are now understand this particular technological device in terms of the science behind it. And they know how to do the sorts of, they know how the engineers did some different scientific investigations in order to find out how to build this. So think about the practices of science and engineering that went into this, designing and conducting a controlled experiment, an investigation in this case, explaining, defining the problem and asking a question, and then explaining the phenomenon, which is electromagnetism, and solving the problem, and then testing to determine if it would solve the problem. So you could go as far as you have time to do. The kids, you can bring in a bunch of, steel objects and have the kids try some of their ideas. They can bring in materials from home and try it. Usually you have to move on at this point, so you can go as far as you can with this, but at least they understand the idea of how the science and engineering are really fully integrated. So here's another example, and let me check the time. I think, yes, we have time to do this because we can go till 11. Is that right, Melissa? I'm not 11, 12 your time, right? We still have 45 minutes about.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, okay. So I'm going to ask you to play the video at this point, and we're going to do another activity in which science and engineering are fully integrated. And shall I unshare my screen for the moment?
Yes, and I'll share mine and play that video.
Okay, so let me just say something while she's queuing up the video. That the purpose of this activity is to have the kids, it's going to be about the nature of air resistance, really, and to think more deeply about air resistance in terms of energy. And also to understand how to do science, you really need to do engineering, and vice versa. And the first video, I'm going to let Melissa play that. And I just want you to, after the video, share with the person next to you or write down your notes. I'm going to take about a minute after the video for you to think about it. What's the relationship here between science and engineering that we see in the video? Okay.
Dr. Schneider, have I cued the correct video?
Yes.
Perfect.
There's a lot of things we just don't know.
Space always has a way of throwing us curveballs and surprising us.
I mean, until we get the data that says we're on the ground safely, I'm going to be worried that we're not going to make it.
Entry, descent, and landing is often referred to as the 7 minutes of terror because it takes about 7 minutes to get from the top of the atmosphere of Mars to the ground safely.
The spacecraft has to do all of this by itself.
There are many things that have to go right to get Perseverance onto the ground safely.
There's a lot counting on this. This is the first leg of our sample return relay race. There's a lot of work on the line.
Starting about 10 minutes before atmospheric entry, we get rid of really the spacecraft part of the rover that's been supporting us.
We come screaming in to the Martian atmosphere at 12 to 13,000 miles per hour.
And the heat shield is what dissipates all that initial energy through friction.
The vehicle will continue actually flying itself through the atmosphere. It's sort of like a transforming vehicle that went from a spacecraft and now it's kind of like an aircraft actively guiding itself.
When we're going slow enough, we deploy a parachute.
It's the biggest supersonic parachute we've ever sent to another planet. It's critical for slowing down the vehicle.
Perseverance's entry, descent, and landing borrows heavily from that of Curiosity.
But fundamentally, Perseverance is a different rover. She's bigger, she has different instruments.
We've added a lot of smarts on the inside to make it more capable so that it can deal with the landing site that we've given it.
The science team identified Jezero Crater as basically an ancient lake bed and one of the most promising places to look for evidence of ancient microbial life and to collect samples for future return to Earth. The problem is it's a much more hazardous place to land.
You look at Jezero, all you see is danger. How do we go to a site that we never thought was safe enough to go to before? So the heat shield, which has protected us all the way through entry, is no longer necessary. We need to get that off so that we can actually see the ground. And we can see the ground in a couple different ways.
Perseverance will be the first mission to use terrain relative navigation. So while it's descending on the parachute, it will actually be taking images of the surface of Mars and determining where to go based on what it sees. This is finally like landing with your eyes open. Having this new technology really allows Perseverance to land in much more challenging terrain than Curiosity or any previous Mars mission could. Amongst the rocks and the craters and the cliffs, these things are hazardous to the rover, but these are the things that are interesting to the scientists.
Once Perseverance has figured out where she is, we jettison the back shell and parachute and light up our rockets. Those rockets help us steer to a safe landing spot that's nearby.
That descent stage takes us all the way down to about 20 meters off the ground.
That's when we start the sky crane maneuver. And once the rover has hit the ground, the descent stage will cut loose from the rover and fly away to a safe distance. Surviving that 7 minutes is really just the beginning for Perseverance. Its job, right, being the first leg of sample return, to go look for those signs of past life on Mars. All that can't start until we get Perseverance safely to the ground. And then that's when the real mission begins.
So, can everybody hear me? Okay. So, every time I listen to this video, I get excited. So let me ask if you would just spend a minute talking and then a minute sharing in the chat how you see the relationship between science and engineering from this video. All right, and then Melissa will read some of that. So I'm going to time 2 minutes here. Go ahead. So Melissa, I'm trying to, can you hear me?
Yes, I'm not seeing your screen right now. It's black.
Oh, there it is. Okay, I got it now.
There we go.
All right. So I think I need to go back. Yeah, here we go. All right, I'll pick it up there in 2 minutes and start looking at the chat when.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Can we repeat the question?
Yeah. First of all, what are your impressions from the video about the relationship between science and engineering that we saw in the video?
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, Melissa, can you read some of what's in the chat?
Sure. April said you had to engineer the rover to get over the rocks and crevices. It had to have cameras and sensors. The science part is the data it collects and sends back to decide if we are building on Mars. And then Allison says there's a clear problem with lots of variables to be defined and tested. Sally says precision. Well, scientists and engineers had to collaborate to make this happen. So many details. She adds physicists too. And Candace says science provided knowledge about friction and atmospheric composition need for entry on Mars. And Kim says the need for problem solving to create solutions for things like friction.
So those are wonderful. I have to say, I am so amazed every time I see this video that what they call the sky crane. They use these retro rockets to get down to 20 meters above the surface, and then they lower the robot on a cord that just unspools, and then they cut it, and then the part with the retro rockets flies off to the side. And if they didn't do that, they would kick up all this dust that would cover the robot and cover the solar cells, and it would never work. I mean, there's so much to this whole process of landing. The engineering involved just amazes me, but its entire purpose is science. It's a science mission to understand Mars and to know about this other body that's nearby in space. Well, not exactly nearby, but one of our closest planets in space. So all of what you said is good. I would always start with this activity, with this video, because it's so dramatic, and kids are fascinated by actually exploration of Mars. So this conversation could just go on for the rest of the period, and then I would pick it up the next day. Or, you know, other kids have less of an appetite for lots of talking and they want to do. So then we begin with this next activity. I use this one, by the way, for mixed groups of teachers and administrators, because I feel it really levels the playing field. Everybody gets involved in this part. So here's the task. So on Mars, we really needed to slow the spacecraft so that if the robot crashed into the surface, it would be no good. It had to be very gently lowered. But Mars had a very, very thin atmosphere, so it required a certain kind of a parachute and also retro rockets. And on a world like Titan, one of the moons of Saturn, it has a very thick atmosphere, and we can use that thick atmosphere to slow the landing of the spacecraft. And so here's a model of it that our scientists developed, but it works somewhat poorly. It doesn't slow things enough. And in the middle, you see these patterns. We start with the one on the left, the largest one. And I usually just hand out that one. And I say, okay, cut on the black lines and fold on the dotted lines and build this little device. And I show them what it looks like. And this is the process of building a very simple device that works okay. Everyone can do it. It's very easy. It falls like a maple leaf. And then say, okay, your job is to improve it. Now, I don't give them the rest of this spreadsheet, this sheet in the middle yet. Have that on the side, but I give them lots of, manila tag and different color sheets of different thicknesses, big sheets of paper even, and say, I want you to experiment to try to make a device that will fall more slowly. And so the speed is of the essence, but you want minimal speed. So you want to have the fall time to be as great as possible. And this is something that doesn't take very long. And people come up with a lot of very creative solutions. And most of them fall more slowly. And then I say, okay, I want to have, and I usually have people working in teams. I said, I want one person from each team to come up here and I want you to test them. Go ahead and test them and show us which one falls more slowly. And of course, they just drop them at different times and you can't really tell. So I said, okay, hold it a second. Does anybody have any idea how we can test these fairly to compare them? And then people come up with ideas, and basically what we develop is a plan for a controlled experiment. And usually we end up testing just 2 at a time instead of 10 at a time, because you can't get 10 people to drop theirs at exactly the same time. But one person can release 2 at precisely the same time and precisely the same altitude. And then you just see which one hits the floor first. So it's a series of, of 2 at a time. So we focus a lot of there about designing an investigation there. And then someone says, well, look, the bigger ones were better. And then some kids say, no, the smaller ones are better. Well, look at mine. Mine is smaller and yours is bigger, but they seem to be the same. So how can we, so this one I have in my pocket. It's the middle sheet. And I said, well, look, can we test size by itself? So we have the same shape, controlling variables, and just testing size. And then we can measure the size of the area of each, measure the drop time, and do a little graph of it. So then it gets to be quantitative. We're collecting data and we're analyzing the data. And this particular one is interesting because I've found usually it's a nonlinear relationship. There's kind of a peak in the middle. So then afterwards I say, okay, this is probably the 3rd day. I want you guys now to take what you've learned, and I want you to design a spacecraft that would actually land on the planet of on the moon Titan of Saturn. And I could have them also investigate the atmosphere itself and what it contains, and think about materials. But this in itself is enough. And so they really are getting a sense, and then researching the moon itself and what we may want to know about that moon. So again, the science comes back into it. So it goes back and forth between science and engineering, and back to science and back to engineering again, to really see how they're connected. And this is the way science is really done. For a time, I did some radio astronomy. And the radio astronomy I worked with was an electrical engineer, but he considered himself to be a scientist because he really had to make sure the equipment worked. And in other cases, there are engineers that design things that really need to be scientists because they really need to understand what they're designing. So that's, I'm going to give you a couple of other quick examples now, and we're going to move right on. So here's one about baking. And so the scenario is somebody wants to make, it's in the unit on acid-base chemistry, and the teacher presents a scenario. You want to make baking powder biscuits, but you don't have any baking powder. You don't have any yeast. Your mother suggests using lemon juice and baking soda instead, but she doesn't know how much. First of all, what would the baking soda and the lemon juice do? Why would you put that in your biscuits? So they need to have some understanding about that chemical reaction. But then we'll do an experiment. And I did this a number of times with kids. They really enjoy doing that because they love baking, and they do, so we make up the batch with everything but except for one ingredient. And then we try different amounts of that one ingredient. And then we bake it, and we do blind testing and see what we find out. What's important, of course, is you got to label the different batches and find out how much lemon juice should be used or how much baking powder should be used. So it really takes a lot of thought to design this activity. And then you realize that baking is a technology, that developing new recipes is engineering. And my very, very favorite book about this is the America's Test Kitchen. And their best recipes, and you can look up some of them online, always start out with defining the problem. We want to make granola so it comes out in chunks, or we want to make our French toast so it's a very custardy. And they define the problem in terms of criteria. What are the criteria of success? How will we know we're successful? And constraints. We might say, well, it's got to be a quick weeknight dish, so it has to take less than an hour to make. So it's a wonderful example of the nature of engineering. And of course, it's always good to eat and fun that way. So going on to this next section now about what do kids learn from it? So for one thing, to know what engineering is. And there's a lot of misconceptions about that. Typically, if you're in a hotel and the toilet doesn't work, and you call the front desk, they say, oh, we'll contact engineering. Well, they're talking about maintenance, but the term engineering is poorly used. So kids don't really have a vision about what engineering really is. So think about it as a potential career opportunity. Do you really want to fix toilets all your life? Well, our plumber makes a lot of money, so I think it is a good living, but it's important just to understand what the skill is. More than half of the nation's 8th graders are not proficient in technology and engineering. We know that from the NAEP assessment. Far fewer girls are interested in engineering than boys, although they score significantly higher on NAEP's assessment of technology and engineering literacy. That's a fascinating finding. In the vast majority of studies, these trends have been reversed through instruction. So engineering activities in school are really important because they can overcome some of these problems. So it engages youth interest because it's team-oriented, project-based, and addresses real-world issues. It's not you're doing it because you have to do it. You're doing it because this is the way we solve problems and meet people's needs. Kids develop 21st century skills, according to some of the studies that we reviewed. Now, remember, this is based on 263 of the studies that we found that had data on kids. And some of the outcomes that were measured were creativity, teamwork, communication skills, persistence, and resilience. That reminds me, by the way, Melissa, when we're done, I'll send you the abstract of our paper, and it has a link to the full study for anyone that wants to look at it. So engineering integrated with science can help students develop concepts and skills in science and math, as well as in engineering. So we find that not only, yes, it takes more time, but they do better at the science and math assessments. And in addition, they learn some engineering. And then motivation and identity as a STEM learner is really important. So here's a little study. The activity was building these submersibles. And of course, kids are testing in a little swimming pool, a child's swimming pool. And this was an urban school where attendance was typically around 50% on any given day. So the class that was studying submersibles, after they started studying submersibles in week 12, these submersible robots, their attendance started to climb and went up to 85%, whereas a comparable class of the same subject maintained about the same level of about 50% attendance. So it really does improve engagement and interest. So I like you to spend just about 5 minutes talking with your colleagues and sharing an example of what you would consider a fully integrated STEM activity that you know about, you've done. If you can't think of one that's close, that could be made really integrated, where the science and the math or engineering are really fully integrated. So I'm just going to give you about a minute to share and write some thoughts in your, let's take 2 minutes. I'll time 2 minutes. And then when you come up with one, write it into the chat so that Melissa can share it. Okay, go ahead. Okay, Melissa, want to read some of what we have in the chat?
Yes, we have build a house, measure the area, square feet, order form, budget, have to insulate, use a thermal device to see where you're losing heat. Contractor, be a contractor to build and design a model of the house using these dimensions. We have another one, says pre-cal students design instruments, analyze their resulting sound waves to learn about transform circular functions. In Algebra 2, students designed catapults when studying quadratics, and then again when studying parametric equations. Another one, measuring exhaust in the air with pollution up north during pickup, cafeteria waste measurement, measuring patina on pennies, and the Statue of Liberty. Ooh, that'd be kind of interesting. Invasive species mitigation in the Jordan River. I could see using all of those. Great.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So, okay, those are wonderful examples. And I can really see, like in the one about the house design, there are all sorts of things that can be involved, and it can focus on sustainability as well. In terms of how the house is powered, what happens to water that flows into it and out of it, what are the different water systems and water flow and fluid dynamics, or it can be as simple as build a little model house out of a shoebox, and what happens if you make sure all the crooks and crannies are sealed versus not sealed, and put a thermometer inside and put it in the sunlight, and compare one house to another one with windows and without windows and so forth. So a lot of simple things you can do, a lot of complex things at whatever level it is that you want to teach, and whatever subjects it is that are your objectives. So anyway, those are wonderful examples. So I'm going to go ahead through part 4 and describe these general methods that we found that really show up time after time in the different research studies. So introducing an engineering challenge early and revisiting it throughout a science unit is more effective than as a capstone activity. So when people are starting to transition from teaching just biology or just chemistry, for example, to bringing in engineering, often it's thought of as, well, we're going to finish, so they need to learn the science first. Then we're going to introduce the engineering activities as a fun activity, and for them to learn to apply what they learned. But if you begin with the engineering challenge, then they develop the knowledge of science or the skill in math or in developing controlled experiments that they need to develop in order to solve the problem. And you can revisit the challenge throughout the activity as appropriate, so that it really increases motivation, because otherwise you don't have that opportunity for motivation. Secondly, using fiction. I mentioned this before, where the protagonist has a problem as a launching point for engineering design. And the 2 studies I have on that is 4th grade, but it could be done at any grade level, including very young children, where the teacher reads to the kids. Using drawing throughout the design process, hand sketching or CAD. So ideas, some kids think, well, like I do, visually more than verbally. And so having them sketch their ideas is really helpful to have. If you have the paper or the whiteboard or whatever it is available for them, they will use it. Also, developing designs using computer-aided design. There are some very, very simple CAD programs that are available free of charge. SketchUp is one of them. And there are online tutorials on how to use that. And number one, it's a professional tool. It's a kid's version of a professional tool. So it's an important skill that they develop. But for kids who feel, I can't draw, but they can click on the box and drag and create a box that's beautiful and perfect in any size they want it. And some of these are so amazing. Even the free versions, you can click on it and say, color this gold or color this purple. And it creates textures and colors so they can actually realize their designs in a way that look like it's a finished product. So CAD is a wonderful tool. Helping parents understand their essential role in encouraging their kids' interest in STEM. So one of the things that really surprised me, I thought that especially kids get older, peer group is most important. But that's not true. It's parents and caregivers all the way through. So a number of the studies, so there are a number of studies about both college students and professionals who went into various STEM fields. And when asked about, well, why did you, engineering in particular, they said, oh, my parents encouraged me. In rare cases, you say, well, my parent tried to discourage me, saying, you know, girls just don't do engineering, or yeah, you could do it, but man, life's going to be tough because all the other students are going to be boys. You know, youth of color, just don't go into this field. Parents have such power to discourage or encourage kids, such power that they need to know their power and own their power. So it's really important to have, now it's pretty common to have a parent night and have the parents there and everybody does an activity. And that's great to show them what you're doing in school or so forth, or for an after school program to have the parents over. But do more than show what the kids are doing. Make sure that the parents know how important their role is in encouraging their kids. And then the last one on this particular list is to engage interest before high school. One of the things that studies show again and again is if by the time kids reach 8th grade, if they don't have an interest in a STEM field, it's very unlikely they'll develop it, even if they're a whiz at science and math. Interest is so important, and especially cultivating that interest in middle school, because elementary kids love science and engineering and activities, and some of them, and most actually love math as well. I found that working on NAEP, that kids really like math, the great majority of them. So, but that interest needs to be cultivated, and so many of them, it's killed at the high school level. So high school teachers, take note and take heart that maintaining that interest is really, really so important. Okay, moving on. So technological systems is another context for engineering. Robotics is probably the most researched. There's more research studies on kids doing robotics than any other field of engineering. And unfortunately, most boys are the ones that like robotics. Girls don't typically like it. But there are a couple of studies where soft robotics were used, like, you know, plastics and fabrics and so forth. Girls were just as interested as boys. Biomedical technologies, which are equally interesting to boys and girls, including topics such as artificial lungs and hearts, designing a prosthetic limb. There's a kidney dialysis system in the high school program that I think is really interesting. So getting kids interested, again, it's not just building something that shows you how the lungs work, but thinking and learning about activities that really involve kids in creative design, where they're also learning about these biomedical systems is important. Electromechanical systems like a burglar alarm is also very effective, designing a burglar alarm. And environmental projects to protect habitats. So so here's a situation where there's been a road going in and right through the Everglades. It's cutting off these animals so that now their habitat areas is much smaller. How can you design methods where the animals can migrate across this road or under the road or over the road? So again, environmental projects equally interest boys and girls. So it's really important to do that. And then youth of color, and it's really important to have role models. Yes, you'll find references to that, but studies show that it really matters. So now role models, there's a difference between role models and mentors. Role models are both college students and professionals who look like the kids, and that's very important. And they might be there just for a visit. they serve as mentors when they actually have a chance to work with the kids and visit them more on more than one occasion. So both are really important and really valuable. If you can engage youth in solving problems relevant to their communities, things that they consider important, that's very effective because they can show others in their communities that they can do something valuable. Kids like to be appreciated for making a contribution. Programs like MESA that nurture youth interest, starting in middle school and then continuing through high school and into college, are very, very effective. And that ongoing efforts to do activities to engage kids with this program or that program, or that work with 4-H or Scouts as kids grow older and age out of one program, thinking about maintaining their interest. So especially outside of school, there are many opportunities to maintain kids' interest in STEM fields, even if their high school programs don't allow for it. But again, both are important. And again, for high school and middle school teachers to be communicating with facilitators who teach in after school and summer program settings about individual kids and making sure that kids get long-term support, especially if they show a spark of interest, because that spark of interest can really grow. There's a program called EPICS, EPICS, and it's a high school program that where the teacher has lots of support in how to involve kids in solving problems in learning engineering design processes, and then figuring out how to solve problems in their communities by collaborating with community organizations. It's an amazing program. So about a third of our studies took place in out of school time programs, after school summer programs mostly, and nearly all were highly successful at maintaining kids' interests. And an advantage is that the facilitators in after school program doesn't have to cover a lot. They don't have to test the kids on the materials. But again, as I said it earlier, it's important for them to assess how the kids are learning. So to do that in a very informal way is really important. And often the studies show huge gains in terms of the percentage of kids in such programs who graduate from high school, who go on to study in STEM fields. It's really remarkable. I want to give you this way of thinking about the ways of integrating STEM science and engineering. One is they learn the concepts and skills separately in each discipline. Multidisciplinary is where they learn them separately, but in reference to a common theme. So it might be, we're going to study pirates. And in one class, we're going to learn about, we're going to read some studies about, read some literature about pirates. In another class, we're going to build this pirate ship and see, what they did. But interdisciplinary were the ones that I was demonstrating earlier. They learn concepts and skills from 2 or more disciplines that are so tightly linked as to deepen knowledge and skills in both areas. You need one for the other. So I was focusing on interdisciplinary. Transdisciplinary is yet another step where real-world problems or projects, where students apply knowledge and skills from 2 or more disciplines and go beyond either of those disciplines in thinking even more broadly. And in this case, kids really come up with their own thoughts and ideas. How will it impact the people if we solve the problem this way? If we are able to find a way for animals to migrate across this bridge when a road is built through the Everglades, how will it affect the students, the animals' lives, and how will it affect the lives of people that live in this area that depend on these animals? So, so that's something to think about. So another challenge is, okay, how do we integrate all 3 dimensions of so the dimensions of science concepts or core ideas, practices, and cross-cutting concepts. And the way to do it is through engineering design challenges that are meaningful to the kids. At the high school level, you really have 5 subjects to teach. You've got physics, chemistry, and biology, but you also have earth and space science that are just as important in standards. And now you have engineering. That's 5 subjects. And in many school settings, kids need to take only 3 subjects of science. So the others need to be integrated into those 3. And that speaks for deep integration. And then there are not a lot of teachers that are really comfortable with integrating these fields. And the best way to do it, I have found, is ongoing professional development led by teachers who are comfortable. Because if another teacher is doing it, other teachers are much more willing to try it. So one of the things I've found out is why, after, decades trying to get standards to include engineering, why finally I walked in a room and said, oh, by the way, we want you to lead this engineering part. And I finally realized why it is finally being accepted. And that's in the US, there are 4 positions in engineering for everyone in science. NASA employs 10 engineers for every scientist. There are more jobs for technicians even than for engineers. So being able to understand technology is really important for everyone. And engineering skills are important for all jobs and for everyday lives, not just for engineers and technicians. For decades, we've been saying to kids, you can be a scientist. Well, to say you can be an engineer and actually there's a job out there for you if you're interested. So it's finally recognized that science and engineering really go hand in hand. So I'd like to end with this slide that many of the challenges that face humanity now and in the future are related to issues like the environment, energy, and health. They require social, political, and economic solutions that have to be informed deeply by knowledge of the underlying science and engineering. So we're doing this for our kids and for their children. And it's really important for all kids. We're not just talking about building the workforce, although that's important, but really solving the serious problems that are really needed. And I'm afraid I've used all my time for questions because it's exactly noontime, I believe. So Melissa, I'm going to turn this back over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Schneider. Wonderful ideas for us to think about when we consider what do we want our STEM vision to look like? How are we going to get there? What pieces might we add to our action plan to help us get there? And I think you also brought up some really important things to consider. Who are some stakeholders that we need to make sure we engage, and how do we engage them? To your last slide, I'd like to add one more idea, how important numeracy is in our students' world today. So I think this idea of where do we find the authentic intersections between science, engineering, technology, and mathematics, that's the world that our students live in now and will continue to live in, and we want to help them improve. So this has been extremely enlightening. Thank you so much for giving us all these ideas that can help us in our journey to kind of change systems to be more authentic and to really integrate these ideas. I'm wondering if everyone can give Dr. Schneider jazz hands. Woo, way to go. Or a round of applause, either one works. I taught 5th and 6th grade, that's what I got.
That's great.
We really appreciate you. Thank you so much. I'll send up a follow-up email with the things that Dr. Schneider's going to send so that you can keep learning more. But we appreciate all of his knowledge and skills. So thank you.
It's been my pleasure. I wish I could be with you during this next session to hear what you're all doing. But anyway, thank you so much, Melissa, for organizing this. And the collaboration that you're doing now is so important. So I wish you all good luck.
These are amazing teams. I'm so excited for what they're doing. Let's take lunch. We will be back at 1 o'clock. Go out and get your endorphins up, run around. Have a great lunch.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dr. Schneider. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Note to self, when you're working at home in your home office and you have a puppy, do not wear open-toed shoes. I'm tired of having my toes licked. On our next break, I'm going to go take care of that. Did not realize that was a problem till the puppy just woke up, but it obviously is a problem. So, if I wiggle around, it's because I'm trying to get my feet away from her. Welcome back. We're excited. I think we ought to get going because we have a lot to do this afternoon. So I'll turn the time over to Rachel, who's going to get us going in our next activity.
Hi, everybody. Well, what a rich presentation by Dr. Snyder. I was thinking about that as I was eating lunch, and I went and grabbed so I got a little bit of a Chick-fil-A, and I got myself one of their ketchup packets, and you open it, and the way it says like tear and then squeeze or something. And in that moment, I thought, okay, this is an engineering moment. Someone thought it's a pain to open those ketchup packets and get ketchup all over, and so they came up with this. Anyway, so it's just immersed in my head. What a great presentation. Kind of think about it in all areas of our teaching with our kids and how to apply that in real life situations. So this is where we get to really look at your situation and your vision and action plan. And after you've processed through the great information Dr. Snyder shared with us, we have this opportunity to then gather back together. And administrators, you'll be leading this discussion again, like we did last time, with your teams to revise your vision and your action plan. And so with that, you'll have about an hour. And what you'll want to do is just debrief the insights from the presentation regarding your effective STEM integration. How has this then changed your STEM vision? And so then taking that information and revising. And what goals are in your action plan do you need to set or revise? So looking closely at those goals and their relation to Principle 2. Then we'll be thinking about what is each stakeholder's role in accomplishing this goal. And again, remembering, kind of refreshing our memory with Noster's model and making sure that we're thinking through each of those components of Noster's model so that we have an effective action plan. And so given that, Dr. Snyder offered up some ideas on how some things to really stop and think about. And so just as a quick refresher, to kind of launch your discussion, we have these particular slides from his presentation, and thinking about, again, how it's essential for math and science to be connected meaningfully and in a way that your coordination of your definitions and goals and outcomes are aligned. And then I love the second bullet point he had, which is mathematical instruction should include meaningful problems. So, I mean, I know I recall, story problems that just didn't make any sense in my own world as a student. And so thinking about how they're meaningful and applicable to our students, and just as science and engineering instruction should include relevant mathematic concepts and procedures. And that seems kind of almost obvious, but also maybe not. We've seen in the past where maybe we could have been more relevant or made sure that in our science, our mathematics, we're using our relevant concepts. So there's that piece to kind of launch into that space. And the second slide he included as a prompt for your discussion is this, our increased level of integration, levels of integration in your action plan and in your vision statement, but thinking about going from disciplinary to transdisciplinary. And from having disciplinary activities, but all the way up to making sure that we have real world problems that are applicable to our students. So kind of use those as your launching pad for your next hour of discussion, where you'll revise. Our administrators will go ahead and lead the discussion and garner all of the great insights you all had from Dr. Snyder to revise your vision and action plan.
Okay, I put a slide in to remind you of your breakout room in case you forgot. It's, we've learned a lot since we started this morning. So if you need help remembering which breakout room is yours. There's a slide here. And also remember at the end, the idea is to have something revised that you can upload for this week, right? So how are you going to revise your vision? How are you going to revise your action plan? So I'll open up the rooms. What time would you like them back at, Rachel?
I put myself on mute, I apologize. About 60 minutes, so if we can come back at 2:05, I think is great. We can come back at 2:05, we'll reconvene then.
Okay, I'll open up the rooms. Have great discussions.
Yeah, you're.
Hey, April, do you need me to move you to a room or are you good? Oh, I think you're muted.
Hi, Melissa.
Melanie?
Vanguard is not in my.
Melissa, shall I get started? Excellent. Okay, friends, welcome back. My name, as Melissa mentioned, is Nathan Ock. You may remember me from such films as STEM Institute Day 1 and Day 2. Hopefully those were real life and not films, but I know that there was also the opportunity for somebody to participate that didn't get to participate every single day. I'm the STEM coordinator at USBE and have had the opportunity to collaborate with a number of you related to various STEM initiatives over the year. I'm excited to continue this conversation surrounding stakeholder feedback and buy-in. And I think that this word plan is particularly kind of descriptive of what we're trying to do here. Like, as I see the structure and the design of this STEM Institute, it's to ensure that there's intention provided to a number of parts that make up a whole, right? And so we've ensured that, or rather you have ensured that you have a representative stakeholder group at the table to be able to make decisions about pushing STEM forward within your community. And then there's aspects of our conversations within the STEM Institute during which we have these kind of systemic efforts to push things forward connected to each of those kind of bins or silos. And so you may remember in days 1 and 2, what we did with stakeholder feedback was, first of all, we tried to identify stakeholders that we did not have at the table making decisions on that first day. And so we made a list of all the potential stakeholders that we would want to get feedback and potential buy-in from. And then on the second day, what we did was to identify the kind of mechanisms by which we could get that feedback and or message and communicate with them to ensure they were familiar with what the circumstance looked like and had some voice and could see themselves within these initiatives. So today, we're kind of taking that to the next systemic level. And we can go to the next slide there, Melissa. Much appreciated. We're going to have 30 minutes again, like we had in day 1 and day 2, to look back at the mechanisms that you had identified or potentially identified within module 2 and start to think about, for the ways that your STEM vision and action plan have started to evolve, in what are the ramifications for those evolutions within your stakeholder feedback and buy-in plan. And further, now that our visions are starting to crystallize a little more, we also have the opportunity to be able to see kind of more, with more depth into the future and make intentional choices about how we're going to have this kind of cyclical or residual opportunities for stakeholders to continue to play a role. Because as we know, like, single points of communication are never enough to create these coherent systems that we're after. And so we need a kind of resonant way, a consistent touch points for stakeholders of all types to be able to understand what's going on within these ecosystems and how they're evolving as time goes on. And so not only is it important to identify like initiatives that you can kind of add to people's plates, but I think what is most important about this next step that we're going through on day 3 is to find the structures that exist within your communities and incorporate these communications and feedback circumstances into those structures so that you no longer have to be the one that's hounding everyone to ensure like that this survey was given or that they included this in their newsletter, but it's actually built into the structures that you all have to organize your community as a whole. And so maybe that looks like going to the CTE department and talking to the person that's in charge of facilitating their monthly or their quarterly meetings with stakeholders across the state and ensuring there's a touch point in there. Maybe it's looking at the newsletter that your science team sends out to the district each month and having a section that's related to your kind of STEM community, so that there's an ongoing section that you're always being able to communicate with them. Maybe there's something connected to like the administrators within schools that there's like, I don't know whether it's like a blog post or it's something within a parent night where there's a structure that is bi-yearly, that there's a table where parents can talk to folks about these new initiatives that you want them to know about. But these structures aren't just add-ons to people's jobs, but are residual opportunities to continue to touch base with stakeholders. So we have the following 25 minutes to jump back into our teams to continue to kind of flesh out what this work looks like. And I know that in day 2, a number of you had mentioned when we came back that you were still in the process of kind of identifying what all of those communication structures look like. So this is an opportunity not only to continue those conversations, but to try to move them into a place that's, I like to use the word sustainable. If you incorporate these things into the structures of how your community is organized, then if you didn't say anything to anyone, they would still happen. And so when we can remove the energy that you have to put in to the system after you've put it in initially to build those structures, then that's when we reach that sustainability perspective. And that's what we're kind of aiming for in these structures that you design. So with that said, any questions, comments, and or concerns before we jump back into breakout rooms? I've not been looking at the chat, but it looks like nothing is in there at the moment. Okay. If there are no other comments, questions, or concerns, let's jump into breakout rooms for our final breakout session of the day. Thanks for your endurance and this opportunity to kind of get to collaborate with one another on these big questions about STEM.
Hey, I'm opening rooms right now.
Thanks, Melissa.
Hey, Melissa, it's Candace.
Hi, Candace.
So I'm going to be jumping in with my group, but is this the type of thing if when we're done, are we coming back here just so I know how to use my time?
Yes, we're coming back for
Okay, cool.
final instructions for the last 10 minutes.
Cool. Okay, that's good. That'll help me know how to structure my time. Thank you. Nate, are you going to jump in or are you staying here?
Yeah, I'll be in a second. I'm just going to make sure everyone's, no one has questions or there's nothing else I can support with.
Thank you.
Hi, Joy. Can I help you move anywhere or are you okay? I think you're muted still.
I'm okay. My team's all in here in the same room with me. So
oh, perfect. Okay.
Discussion in here.
Okay.
Thanks.
Do love a good face-to-face conversation.
John Hughes is funny. He just chatted. So what am I supposed to be doing? I love him. He's great. How's France?
It's great. It is nighttime, and the jet lag last night was rough on my sleep. So I'm losing energy a little bit, but just at the right time at the end of the day here.
I could tell. That's why I sent you the text. Did you see the text I sent you?
Oh, I didn't even see it. Was that yawning or something?
I could just tell from the look in your face. Oh, he is really tired.
Yeah, I was up at 3:30 this morning, and it's almost 10 o'clock now. So.
Oh wow! Thank you for doing it. I'm so sorry.
Oh no, don't be sorry. It's a pleasure to get to be here. It's like I was looking forward to it all afternoon.
We need to plan a time to meet up to debrief after. Do you want me to send out a doodle poll or do you guys want to look at calendars quickly right now?
Melissa, if you just look at where I have open spots in my calendar, everything's up to date for me. So if you can fit me in, great. If not, like I'm also happy to touch base with you the next time we have a one-on-one.
That sounds great.
Cool.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks all. I'm going to jump to my room 6.
I'm just getting over my jet lag, so I feel your pain. I slept for, we got home and I went to sleep at 6 p.m. and my husband kept saying, you got to stay up as long as you can. And I'm like, this is as long as I can. This really is.
Zoom recording. Okay, Nate, I think everyone's back.
Awesome. Well, we are excited to continue to hear about the evolution of your entire STEM ecosystem plan or vision and action plans, and including within that your plan to be able to include for both feedback and communication your stakeholders, but also like one final thing I wanted to mention about this is like this process isn't about just making sure people are informed, but it's about building like connections to your community. Like when you can create advocates that are willing to do that communication for you and bring your message to people that you don't always connect with, that's when you know that your initiatives have been really successful. That's when you can truly reach sustainability, is when your community is actually growing without you having to put additional energy in. So we will touch base on this topic one final time in day 4. And Melissa, I'll kick it over to you to finish up our day today.
Great. So just in closing, the learning intentions for our STEM Institute are to participate in professional learning related to effective STEM ecosystems, to really develop our vision of STEM and our action plan for that, that includes supports, which is part of the stakeholder piece. So today, you'll know if your team was successful, if you engaged in the professional learning. Hopefully you engaged with Dr. Schneider and enjoyed that. And then if you looked at refining your vision statement and refining your action plan to maybe include some of these ideas from Principle 2 about where all of the different disciplines naturally intersect. And then you finished off with Nate, who did a fabulous job, helping us think about now moving forward, how do we get stakeholders on board? What are we going to do? What's our plan for that? Realize your plan doesn't have to be done. We're just getting those things in place. You'll implement that as you go along through next year, and starting now as you want, but through next year, this is just getting those ideas in place. So don't think you have to have implemented everything by next month. That's not the point. So your intercession work is to, if you didn't have a chance to finish kind of getting your plan ideas down for your stakeholders, if you could work on that as a team, and every team member needs to come prepared for our networking at the first of session 4, where you'll share what you have in your plan so far. Before you go, you'll want one member of your team to turn in your revised vision statement and your revised action plan, so that you can kind of track progress on that. And then everyone who filled out the assignment number 2, your insights with Dr. Schneider, just turn that in to submit that in Canvas. And just one final thing that'll only take a couple of minutes, and you will be out of here early. You'll have like 5 or 6 minutes of your life back. Woohoo! If you wouldn't mind filling out the Qualtrics questionnaire, this helps us as we think about how funds have been spent for professional learning and what worked for you, what maybe didn't, so that we can best support you in years to come. So this is an important feedback survey about your experience today. And realize that we will be looking forward to seeing you on day 4, which is April 14th, where we look into Principle 3. And we have about 5 different breakout groups that STEM Action Center, which some of you mentioned today, CTE, the IC groups. So there are many breakout rooms for us to join and learn more information next time about Principle 3. So if you'll just all join me in thanking Nate and Rachel and Katie for their help today with the STEM Institute. Woo! I don't see enthusiasm. Oh, yay. Thanks, Shauna. Thanks, Joy. Thanks, Candace. And also all of you. Woo! Thanks for your hard work. These are rigorous days. Thank you for hanging in there and for doing the hard work. Let us know how we can support you in any way. Fill out the survey. Have a great rest of your day and almost weekend. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.